Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
The truck squealed as it turned the corner, going into a sharp drift that threatened to topple it and everyone inside. Marcus got back control and pushed hard on the accelerator. The speed quickly climbed along the open city street, 50, 60, 70 miles per hour. The sound of sirens was loud behind them, and thankfully, the area was dead at this time of night. Marcus knew if it came to a choice between a pedestrian or stopping, he would choose to hit the pedestrian. He didn't want to, of course, but his freedom meant much more to him than the life of a stranger. The police hadn't turned onto their tail yet, so he once again whipped off to a street on the right. It was just as dark and quiet, and he looked frantically around for a good place to hide until the heat died down some. A gravel road went off down a grassy hill and into an unlit area. Part of his brain knew better. It wasn't a good place to turn around if he needed to. He would essentially be blocking themselves in. But the truck was low on gas, and this would likely be as good a place as he would find. "Hang on, everybody. We're going off-road." He sharply turned off to the right and instantly felt every little bump as the truck careened downward. He shut off the lights as he pulled next to an old building that sat next to an overgrowth of trees and brush. Not quite a forest, but close enough to matter. As the truck slowed and moved off toward the corner of the building, he saw a set of flashing lights drive by. They hadn't caught on to him. Not just yet, anyway. He knew he should try to conceal the truck somehow, but didn't have the time to think about it. Maybe if they got into the building and found an old tarp or something, it would be worth doing, but for now, he and his co-workers got out with their merchandise and frantically looked for a way in. The front doors were locked and boarded up, as were the windows, but Marcus climbed up to one of them and began kicking boards out of the way. Finally, he had enough room to slide in, followed by the other three. The four of them took a moment to take in their surroundings. It was dark, but as their eyes adjusted, they could begin to make out a warehouse. Racks lined the room, mostly empty, others with random boxes. None of it to help their situation. The sound of sirens off in the distance was good. So far, they had made off with about $900,000 in precious gemstones. "Ha! We did it, man!" yelled Connor. "Hell yeah! We're set for life!" echoed Thompson.
"We didn't do shit,"
came the feminine voice from further away. Naples leaned against the wall, listening for sounds of traffic. Connor and Thompson both looked at her incredulously. "What you mean we ain't done shit? We got the goods. We got away from the cops. Now all we gotta do is fence this ice and we split. Real easy," said Thompson, smacking one hand into the other for emphasis. "Yeah. The only real problem now is deciding which bitches get to ride my junk first," said Connor. "Don't be stupid." "She's right, y'all," Marcus iterated. "If by some very slim miracle the police don't find us here, you think they ain't gonna find us when we leave? Not to mention, you ain't gonna have very many bitches for long with that small a payday." "What do you mean? It's almost $1 million, Connor laughed, still wrapped up in his delusion.
"Now divide that by 4, you idiot,"
said Naples. "Fuck you mean to say we risked felony jail time for a measly old quart?" yelled Thompson. "That was the deal from the beginning, asshole. Don't you be getting no remorse just 'cause you're too dumb to see the bigger picture," said Marcus. Thompson began walking up to him, squaring up his shoulders to meet with the older guy. Marcus pulled the pistol out of the back of his pant line, holding it up to his head. The two locked eyes for a while before Thompson chuckled. "I need this shit, man. I'm gonna take what's mine and get me away from your goofy ass. Marcus lowered his gun and let out a breath. Punk. Thompson and Connor began laughing about all the wonderful things they were gonna do. Marcus shook his head and made his way to Naples, who was looking over a pistol. We need to find a place to stash these just in case we do get busted, he said in a hushed tone.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. I'm not certain about how our odds are of getting out of here, but I wouldn't bet my life on it just yet. If they do catch us, it could be a good way to knock a few years off at least.
I'm gonna go look upstairs. You look down here. And keep an eye on them while you're at it. I don't trust them. She nodded, and they both made their way to the right side of the building. You two, stay here and keep a lookout. You see anyone walking around here, do not start firing. Understand? You come get me first. Yeah, sure thing, boss, said Connor. Marcus and Naples looked to each other one last time, and then split up. The stairs led to an office of some kind overlooking both the warehouse, as well as a production floor on the other side. Most of the machinery was still there, and assembly lines filled most of the floor. The office itself wasn't overly large. A computerless desk sat toward the back with an old, ripped-up chair still sitting behind it. Useless papers were strewn here and there, forgotten by the passage of time. Something odd stood out, though. To the left of the desk against the wall sat a large trunk. It was half open, and he could just see that it was empty. That wasn't strange on its own, but it looked brand new, not part of the building. Marcus gave it a quick thought and decided to throw the bag of stolen goods inside of it. If the police did come, odds are they would probably find it, but it was better than nothing. After stashing the sack and seeing nothing else of value, he made his way back out and down the stairs. Halfway down, as a second thought, he turned to go close the box and heard it fall shut and click on its own. Maybe older than I thought, he said to himself, and continued down to meet the others. Thompson and Connor saw Marcus approach and also noticed his empty hands. You ain't holding out on us, are you, bro? Asked Thompson. Man, don't even worry about it. I stashed him just in case we get caught, eh? You hear anything while I was gone? Nah, man, it's been quiet as a grave. Naples is still looking around, said Connor. Okay, I'm gonna go meet up with her and see what's on the other side. You guys stay sharp. The two nodded, and once again, Marcus turned to the production floor. Once he was through the door, they looked at each other and nodded. Thompson walked as quickly and quietly up the stairs as he could. The two had made a plan to grab the jewels for themselves and make a quick split while Marcus and Naples weren't looking. He took a quick look around, heart thumping in his chest, and noticed the shut box in the corner. He made his way over to lift the lid. There it was, the bag that would change their lives. Grinning, he reached his hand in for it and tried to pull his hand out when he noticed the moisture lining the bottom. His hand wouldn't budge. It was stuck and pulling hard on his skin. Just as he was about to stand, he heard a low growl and saw long, sharp teeth push through the chest's opening. The lid came down hard in his arm, and he screamed as the teeth sank all the way through the skin and meat of his arm. He tried pulling harder, but a long tongue wrapped around what remained of his now destroyed limb and pulled him headfirst in. A few short screams later, and it was silent. His twitching body was slowly pulled further in until all that remained was a bloody carpet. Marcus and Naples were discussing what their next plans should be when they heard it. They both looked up to the windows in the manager's office, but it was too dark. "Fuck!" yelled Marcus. His first thought was that they were caught, but it didn't make sense why someone would be screaming from up there. Then he remembered where he stashed the goddamn gems. "I'm gonna kill that backstabbing son of a..." On the other side of the door stood Connor. He was pale and pointing up the stairs with a shaking hand. Marcus grabbed him by the shirt and shook him violently. What happened? What the fuck is that asshole doing? When Connor didn't respond, Marcus smacked him a few times. It seemed to snap him back to the world, and he was finally able to talk. It was all Thompson, boss. He was talking all crazy about taking everything for himself. I saw him go up, but he screamed, and I ain't seen him since. Useless asshole, Marcus yelled, throwing him to the ground. Naples was already up and in the room. He met her at the door, and they both looked around. Nothing was out of place except a large amount of blood that was soaking into the green carpet. That and the chest was missing. He looked all around for any possible explanation, and noticed the window leading out to the warehouse was open. There was no possible way for anyone to go out without dropping down about 20 feet. It was possible, but how had he gotten by unnoticed? And why was there so much blood on the floor? It wasn't adding up. Connor, you sure you didn't come back down these steps? He nodded dumbly in response. Fucking useless, everyone. Okay, Naples, we're gonna split up and find that double-crossing backstabber, and then we're gonna get the hell out of here.
Believe me, when I get a hold of him, there won't be anything left to give a share to.
She growled back. She pulled out her pistol and ran down the stairs. Connor, you go to the other side and look for him. I'm gonna stay up here where I can see everything. If I catch you trying to sneak off with him, you're gonna be just as dead as he's gonna be. Got it? Connor nodded and ran over to the doors going out. He knew something was very wrong here, and that Thompson didn't just flake out on them, but he was glad to be down here and away from that room. At this point, he would have almost welcomed getting arrested. He made his way from assembly line to assembly line, gun rattling in his hand, looking around like a scared little rat. He could swear he heard sounds, some sort of movement he wasn't able to make out. Must have been echoes from the other side of the building. Surely there wasn't anything over on this end. Hell, even if he did find anything, he would just stay out of its way anyway. Much safer. The bathrooms were over here too, and he realized he badly needed to piss. He was surprised his bladder hadn't yet burst. He ran over to the dark room, into the first urinal he could make out. He undid his pants just in time, and the relief was instant. Tears almost seemed to form in the corner of his eyes as he emptied himself. He was so lost in the moment, he didn't hear the low growls coming from the toilet, or the long, dagger-like teeth begin to slide out of the top and bottom of its surface. His joy turned to revulsion as he felt something brush against his leg. He looked down and saw something like a snake with sharp barbs poking out wrap his thigh. He screamed and tried to pull away, but like Thompson, it was like he was superglued to the thing. He gave one hard pull, but it wasn't enough, as the long tongue pulled him back, and daggers of pain shot through Connor's skin. His screams turned to high-pitched wails as the teeth pushed through the meat and bone of his hip. There was no escaping this thing as he fell to the dust-covered floor. He tried to move away, but his lower body no longer followed his commands, and the thing's tongue pulled him closer still. Connor's body was devoured, and the creature's enamel-looking body turned to a blob-like state. Its mass, which was originally so small, filled out and was growing quickly. The gelatinous blob crawled up the walls and through a hole in the ceiling. The door burst open as Marcus ran inside, gun drawn. He looked around but didn't see anything but a nasty old bathroom at a first glance. Then he noticed the dark color in the center of the dust. He reached down and touched it, feeling it was wet. He smelled it, and it had the iron tang of fresh blood. Naples came in behind him, aiming at anything that could be a threat.
You find him?
She asked. Nah. Pretty sure the fool's dead. More blood, but no body, he said, as he stood and pointed his gun toward the dark stains.
Well, I hate to say it, but we better cut all losses and just go if we don't want to end up like them.
She was clearly bitter about the thought of losing close to $1 million. Who could blame her? Her life was much more valuable to her. It might not be so bad if they knew what they were up against here, but with nothing to go on but pure fucking vanishing acts, it would be stupid to wait and find out. Yeah. God, I hate to, but there ain't no way in hell I'm dying in this place. It'll be daylight soon. We ought to get back out front and head south. Nothing but woods once you get toward the edge of the city. Maybe we can make it. With a sigh, she nodded, and they made their way back to the front. Man, I really wish I had a flashlight, Marcus said under his breath.
I know what you mean, but we'd be a walking beacon. Better to move quietly through the dark,
she said in a barely audible tone. They walked to the door, guns drawn, and Naples pushed it open. Through it, she didn't see the warehouse, but another door, exactly like this one.
When were there 2 doors?
She asked, looking over. Marcus looked just as confused when she noticed her hand was stuck. They also noticed the gleaming white teeth begin to form from around the door in its frame.
Oh shit, Marcus, help!
She pulled hard, but the door wouldn't budge, and its long, fat tongue pushed out and began to encircle her. Marcus fired round after round into the creature. They seemed to do very little, and with his last bullet, he hit what he thought might have been an eye. The creature screeched in pain, and the tongue unraveled around her. She pulled hard and her hand came away, but not without losing a large area of skin from her fingers and palm. They both ran back, and she sent every bullet she had into the creature.
It's not working! What the hell is it?
She yelled, throwing the gun into its now melting body. The form became an amorphous blob once again and rolled toward them, corralling them into a corner. "Climb over them belts!" yelled Marcus, and the two began making their way slowly to the door behind the thing. It was faster than it should have been, and as they climbed over the final line, the blob attached itself to Marcus's leg. "Let go, you fuck!" He desperately pulled and was getting nowhere. The gelatinous form began to make large white teeth, and they sank down just above the knee. He screamed as blood pumped in heavy streams from the severed limb. It went in for another bite, but Naples was able to pull him free. She wrapped an arm around him, and the two went for the front door. She was about to open it when it shot open by itself. "On the ground, now!" A police officer had a flashlight in their eyes and a gun trained directly on them. They got down as best they could, trying to warn them of the monster that was inside, but they were ignored as handcuffs were slapped around their wrists. Naples was taken to the back of a squad car, and they did what they could for Marcus's leg. Detective Norris, who was assigned to the case, pulled up not too long after. "The hell happened to him?" he asked, looking at Marcus's grievous wound. "Not sure. He was raving about some monster and then fainted. Our best guess is they didn't want to split the money and turned on each other. Good thing the gunshots were called in, or we would have never checked out this old place. Anyone been inside yet?" "Well, we wanted to wait for backup before we cleared it. The other two haven't been apprehended yet. Could get ugly." The sergeant nodded. "Wait here with him until paramedics arrive. You two, I want you to back me up. Everybody clear?" "Yes, sir," they all replied. One of the officers quickly opened the door, and Norris readied his weapon. It was quiet. In a hushed tone, he told them to follow as he walked softly inside. They made their way to the staircase and the ladder that led up to a trap door to the same office. He motioned for them to go up the ladder, and he would take the stairs. Sergeant Norris was no stranger to dangerous situations. This could easily turn bad fast, so he needed to be faster. He moved as silent as possible, while making good time up to the office, weapon ready to take out any threat. He got to the top and found there was none. He looked around the office, seeing no one other than himself. He did notice the blood on the floor, though, still moist, but no trapdoor or entrance in the floor. That's when he heard it. The screams of the other officers coming from below him. In a flash, he was down the stairs and looking at something. He was sure it couldn't be right. The ladder they were on was curling up around both the men. The trapdoor attached to the ceiling was wide open, surrounded with massive white teeth. Saliva dripped down on top of the trapped officers as it slowly pulled them in.
It was just another hot day in the Cove. The Watcher was so still, if not for the sweat dripping down his brow, he could have been mistaken for a mannequin. Locals never paid any mind to individuals such as him, though. Outsiders are plenty around these parts, and if they don't leave after 2 or 3 months, they become locals themselves. That's simply the gist of this place. It becomes either insufferable or kryptonite. The Cove is not a town, nor is it a village. It can hardly even be described as a neighborhood, seeing how it's just a straight 2-mile road, too narrow to be an avenue, yet too wide to be an alley. What makes the Cove special, though, is that it's a never-ending bazaar of tricks and trades, gadgets and consumables, necessities and entertainment. The only thing denser than the rows of townhomes on both sides of the road are the tables, counters, and taverns in front of them. In most cases, the open shops are being operated by the very people who live in the buildings behind them, which is another reason why the Cove is such a lovely place to be and shop in. It's like a never-ending garage sale with a dash of neighborhood party. The bargain is in the blood of almost every descendant of the Cove, and so is the love for the community. They always put helping each other out above making profit. In fact, 2 sellers are quite well known for not having had a penny to their name for several years. They survive by exchanging their skills for food or daily necessities, and since both of them are quite talented in their trade, no customer has ever had reason to complain about the peculiarity of their prices. It's a lovely place to live in. There is no abundance to be found here, no riches or opulence, but very bright colors and joy in the air so vibrant, it's addictive. They call it the Cove, despite the absence of water horizon. Even so, it's nothing short of a secluded piece of heaven for most. Not only that, but it's hot all day, every day, no matter the season. Cooks and craftsmen like to show off their skills under the watchful eye of the potential buyer, be it through the boiling oil they cook their food in to the hot iron they mold their items from. Nevertheless, search every map ever made, be it old, new, on paper, or digital, and there is no documentation to be found of the place. Tourists have found the Cove by accident numerous times, and they would either decide to stay forever or couldn't leave the place fast enough. Those who decided to stay would become part of the family. For that is what the people living in the Cove are to each other. Family. The Watcher, however, is not interested in becoming family with anybody. He would have left days ago if the buddy he drove here with would have given him a heads up when he left in the middle of the night. The Watcher swore to find the fucker somehow and break his neck, but then the universe drew a straight line over his priorities. Her name was Rosalinda. The name was hard to miss because the seamstress was so beloved amongst the locals. She couldn't walk 5 feet without having a voice call out to her either for a warm hello or a gift of sorts. It was impossible not to notice her too. Every smile she offered, every hug, even the sound of her voice was bottled purity. Even more so, she seemed to glow with light so warm and intense, her entire being was a gravitational core for attention. And oh, how she attracted. The Watcher postponed leaving the cove just to observe Rosalinda for a while longer. And observe he did. He was watching her open a window and the shallow move inside as the seamstress put her hair up in a messy bun. A slender caramel arm reached for the window handle to pull it shut, and that was the Watcher's cue to move. Rosalinda descended from her stuffy apartment onto the busy market with her signature smile. It was an exceptionally hot day in the Cove, but that was not the reason why the Watcher felt the urge to swallow, although his mouth was dry. The girl was wearing nothing but a frilly white bralette and something that looked like a Christmas-themed tablecloth tied around her middle. As usual, she was carrying a straw basket between her right arm and her hip, big enough to fit 3 times the shopping she was about to make. Save for the sandals on her feet and the ribbon in her hair, there was absolutely nothing else accessorizing her body. Even so, Rosalinda was easily the most beautiful woman to walk down the Cove, and the locals weren't shy about letting her know. It was not unusual for Rosalinda to get appreciative whistles or comments as she was walking down the street. She made a habit of acknowledging every single one of them, either with a wave and a grin or a sassy remark, earning herself laughter and enjoyment from more people than the Watcher could count. Good, he thought. This is good. The more attention the others attract to themselves, the better he could camouflage his presence in the crowd. He was invisible. He would slalom past people, leaving no impression more lasting than the tiles he stepped on. Rosalinda stilled her pace next to a band of street musicians on their break. There were 4 of them, a conga player, a guitar player, and a player holding a pair of clave, who also had a pair of maracas resting against his seat. The singer was a slender, dark-skinned woman whose outfit somehow mirrored Rosalinda's, but looked a lot more put together and much less happy. She had one leg over the other, and her entire head slacked over the fist supporting her jaw. "What's wrong, pal?" Paula looked up and offered a sad smile to the inquiring girl. Rosalinda approached the musicians and looked inside the open guitar case which, unlike most days, sported very few coins and a melting lemon mint. "That won't get you guys through today, will it?" Paula shrugged. "Felipe had an accident. His suspended bathroom cabinet detached from the wall. The mirror inside fell on his left arm." Rosalinda's green eyes grew wide. Felipe was left-handed, which meant the main hand he was playing his instrument with was out of order. "Good Lord, is he okay?" "Yes, it'll take a while until his arm recovers, though." Rosalinda knew what she meant. The musicians were well known and cherished in the Cove, but were it not for Felipe's charisma and talent with the trombone, chances that the other 4 members would make enough money for a meal at the end of the day were slim. "How? You can still sing?" "I've been singing all morning, but to no use. It's not the same without him." Rosalinda dropped her basket next to the friendly old lady, operating the liquor tavern next to the musicians. The seamstress's hand went straight for the ribbon in her hair. "Damien?" "Havana." Damien didn't need to be asked twice. They would have normally needed a piano for that particular track, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Rosalinda grabbed Paula by the hand and guided her to the middle of the street, earning a gaping crowd of at least 10 people before the song even began. "Follow my lead," Rosalinda whispered to her friend, and brought them both into position before the guitar dictated them to move. The first guitar chords had Rosalinda bend Paula's upper body in a dip so low, mothers all around were covering the eyes of their children. The 2 women had the audience in a trance. It was obvious that Rosalinda was leading. She had no problem taking on the role of a man either, twisting Paula's waist and grabbing her by her arms and legs as if they've done the routine thousands of times. It was sloppy in some parts. The 2 stepped on each other's feet, sure, but that were so sensual while doing it nobody noticed, not even the Watcher. The only men who had the presence of mind to take their eyes off the dancing duo were the instrumentalists, and all three of them were cursing their musical task for depriving them of the spectacle. The song came to an end, and the women finished their dance with the singer's smooth leg around the seamstress's waist, both of them panting for air with their faces mere inches apart from each other. The crowd roared. Applause erupted up and down the cove from men and women alike, but the sound both girls aimed for, the sound they did what they did for, was the one that came after the applause. The sound of coin and paper falling into a guitar case. Paula grabbed both of Rosalinda's hands and kissed them. "Thank you, friend. Truly." The green-eyed beauty caressed the singer's cheek, and before they parted, the singer snuck the biggest bill she could find in the guitar case in the seamstress's basket. Rosalinda tried to refuse it, but Paula began to sing alongside her boys, ignoring her protests with a wink and a wave. The seamstress was plenty loved by the locals, but that didn't mean that money wasn't tight, even for her. She took it, blew the band a kiss farewell, and went on her merry way. The Watcher followed. Merchants, farmers, and manufacturers were calling for Rosalinda from every part of the cove. Every one of them had an offer, especially for her. They weren't exaggerating either. The prices they were offering their products for were laughable. But the seamstress kept on walking. She acknowledged the whistles and greeting with cheeky remarks, but nothing deterred her from descending down the road. Not even an anonymous stalker, watching inconspicuously from a safe distance. The Watcher thought he was almost found out when the green-eyed beauty suddenly stopped and turned her head to the right. She approached the side of the street cautiously, crouching down somewhere between a stack of papers and a fish market, where two buildings were separated by a narrow path. The Watcher had to pretend to look at the belts and cufflinks out on display on the other side from where the seamstress was, which was the perfect vantage point to see and not to be seen. Rosalinda was talking to a frail-looking boy, no older than 10, sitting on the ground and crying bitterly over a rusty birdcage. "Papa's going to kill me." "Not if you explain what happened, Benji." "He never listens to me. I told him Pierre wasn't ready. I told him he didn't master the tricks fully yet." The Watcher saw bruises on the boy. Their size and form looked all too familiar to the products he was hiding amongst. "Do you want me to come along?" Rosalinda asked. "I can tell him I witnessed the parrot flying away as soon as you opened the cage." "And what good will that do?" Benji blew his nose in the sleeve of his sweater. "Papa doesn't care about Pierre. All he cares about is what I bring back home." And indeed, the melon hat resting upside down by the boy's frame was completely empty. Rosalinda rummaged through her basket in search of the bill she had gotten from Paula earlier. Benji eyed the bill hungrily. His honest desire of not getting beaten up outweighed his morale, so he kept silent as he watched Rosalinda fold the bill into a paper dove and sneak it into his birdcage. "That should be enough for today, and you won't need to worry about tomorrow either." Benji hugged Rosalinda as tightly as he could, thanking her profusely between relieved sobs. Rosalinda explored the contents of her basket once more and held out a shiny red apple for the boy to take. "Thank you," Benji squealed. The seamstress kissed his forehead, got up, and continued her path down the cove. Benji was just about to bring the apple to his lips when it was yanked out of his hands. The boy looked up, and the first thing he saw was arms. Powerful arms. Strong arms. Arms made to hit, suffocate, pin down, and steal. The Watcher's gaze followed the shrinking figure of Rosalinda. The man took a bite of Benji's apple with a crunch so loud it resonated in the narrow path stretching beneath them. Apple juice dripped down the Watcher's chin as he chewed on the piece of fruit, disregarding the rest of it with a toss so forceful it hit a brick wall and broke into multiple tiny pieces. The Watcher didn't acknowledge Benji at all. He resumed following Rosalinda and didn't even turn around when he heard the boy get off the ground and run a few feet behind him. Benji wanted to shout. He wanted to stop the Watcher from what he was about to do, apple or no apple. He was worried to his core, but his legs somehow thought better of it. Benji stopped pursuing the Watcher and just watched as he and Rosalinda went further down the cove to where the road got less busy and a whole lot darker. 20 minutes later, Rosalinda had finally reached her destination, the fabric market. The curtains of fabric and beads were a perfect disguise for the Watcher, as it allowed him to not only keep an eye on the seamstress, but also hear the conversations she was having. Deirdre! An old woman with earlobes hanging to her chin due to years of wearing heavy earrings greeted her from behind the counter. Hello there. Are you looking for my granddaughter? Rosalinda looked slightly taken aback. The old woman was wearing brightly colored clothes and richly beaded jewelry. Why, yes, I believe so. You must be Madame Noir. The lady laughed. My reputation precedes me. Call me Dahlia, sweetheart. Any friend of Deirdre is a friend of mine. The Watcher spied on the women while pretending to look at a carpet. Madame Noir had a snake of pure gold with rubies for eyes, spiraled around her lower right arm, and cataracts so dense her eyes could have been mistaken for marbles of milk. Rosalinda tried studying the fabrics in the presence of the older woman, and for the first time that day, the Watcher could tell she felt uneasy. The older woman, on the other hand, seemed delighted by her presence. Deirdre told me about you. She did? Yes, she told me you're the one who helped with her sales last winter. The vest you created from those animal skins my granddaughter didn't know what to do with were very well crafted. You're talented, young lady. Thank you, ma'am. Madame Noir was in front of the seamstress in a heartbeat. She didn't bother asking for approval. The old lady's hands found Rosalinda's face and were studying her features with intensity and devotion. Lord, what a beauty. You must be quite adored amongst men. The younger woman giggled. Not really, ma'am. Dahlia, I insist. May I offer you a reading? Rosalinda said nothing. Oh, come now, don't fuss. I'm good at my trade and it's completely free of charge. Madame Noir smiled at Rosalinda and held out her hand. If the Watcher would have known any better, he would have sworn that the moment Rosalinda's palm found itself in the fortune teller's, the red eyes of the golden snake came alight. No sooner did the fortune teller touch Rosalinda's palm with the fingers of her free hand that her warm smile was replaced by a deep scowl. Madame Noir pressed her wrinkly fingers in Rosalinda's open hand hard enough to hurt. The old woman let out tiny gasps as she was probing and seeking, shaking her head dismissively in search of a clear picture. Just as Rosalinda wanted to say something, a much younger version of the fortune teller, with clear eyes and small earlobes, came forth from a neighboring booth. Linda? Gran, what are you doing? Shh! Rosalinda looked at Deirdre for help. Deirdre mirrored her distress. Gran, you're making my friend uncomfortable. Please, let her go. I see. The fortune teller's voice trembled, and her two-man audience, 3, counting the Watcher, forgot how to breathe. I see. Death. Rosalinda paled. Grandmother! Madame Noir gasped, dismissing her granddaughter's attempted interference. I see death. I see blood. It's everywhere. It's death. The screams. Oh, agonizing screams. Such a terrible, terrible death. Alone, damp room, hunger. I can feel the hunger. The animal is here. The fortune teller locked eyes with the Watcher. The Watcher flinched and pulled the carpet he was allegedly studying so hard he attracted attention to himself from the shop owner and 2 visitors. Neither Rosalinda nor Deidre noticed the small commotion going on behind them. Deidre was trying to peel her grandmother's hands off her friend, and Rosalinda was trembling from head to toe. Don't mind her, Linda. She gets it wrong often. It's not like, who knows what she actually saw? She's surely misinterpreting things. It wouldn't be the first time, I assure you. Madame Noir didn't pay attention to Deidre enough to correct her. She was too busy staring empty holes into the carpet the Watcher was hiding behind. Rosalinda pressed her freshly red hand to her chest, looking at the old lady with a mixture of fear and perplexity. Neither of the 2 women looked in the direction Dolly was, for the old woman was blind. What could she be looking at anyway? Linda? It's okay. I'm okay. Rosalinda addressed the old woman. One makes their own destiny, ma'am. With all due respect for your trade, I don't believe in omens or predictions. Now, if you'll excuse me. Rosalinda grabbed her basket and turned to leave. I'll come again tomorrow morning, Dee. Deidre didn't try to stop her. She was tactful enough to understand that her friend needed to put some distance between herself and the fortune teller for the time being. Even though the moving shadow at the carpet tables didn't go unnoticed, Deidre turned to her grandmother. I thought I asked you not to let them know when you see such things. Dahlia looked confused. But she's your friend, and that's exactly why you should have kept quiet. The old fortune teller hung her head in shame. Deidre hugged her tightly and guided her behind their display of buttons, where they drank tea and talked. The Watcher resumed his pursuit as soon as he was certain that the aroused suspicion died down. Fortunately for him, Rosalinda didn't turn to head back home. Quite the contrary. She continued descending down the cove, where the bazaar turned much less lively and colorful. Tables and displays were getting fewer and fewer, so were the people managing and shopping them. It was getting more and more difficult for the Watcher to hide in the crowd or behind piles of merchandise, but that was hardly an issue at this point. Judging by the faces of the people Rosalinda and him were passing by, they all looked sickly and weak or just too drunk to be present in any other place other than their inner world. It was like the surroundings were asking for tragedy. The seamstress kept walking, and the Watcher could not believe his luck. The street turned deserted. Just then, out of the blue, the seamstress turned left between 2 dark buildings. The Watcher glued his back to the building closest to him and slid along the wall to sneak a peek at Rosalinda. She had her back to him as she raised her bralette to her face to wipe the sweat off. The Watcher felt his pants tighten. He snuck a hand into the pant pocket where he kept his hunting knife. Rosalinda covered herself again and went further down the path between the 2 buildings, stopping at the 4th window on the right. She looked inside. The window was so low, she was surely staring into a basement or an underground apartment. Shoot, not home again? Rosalinda straightened her back, went down the stairs and into the basement, not bothering to close the door behind her. The Watcher couldn't help but smile to himself as he ran to the spot the seamstress disappeared from. The time had come for him to blow his cover. It didn't matter anymore. He had the girl trapped in a confined, underground place, away from anybody and anything who could jump to her rescue. It was absolutely perfect, and it had been all too easy. Stupid girl. But just as he rapidly jumped over half of the stairs, he noticed. The seamstress was nowhere to be seen. The bottom of the staircase was drenched in darkness, but even so, he should have been able to catch sight of the back of her head. regardless of how fast she was. The darkness moved. Yoo-hoo! The Watcher turned with a start. Rosalinda's leg kicked him straight in the chest, and he rolled down the stairs like a bag of stones, hitting his head hard on the concrete beneath. The movement he saw in the darkness intensified. The entire basement seemed to be moving in waves like the walls were made of black gelatin. The air was vibrating and prickling at the Watcher's skin, who, despite calling to every muscle in his body, remained immobile. "Rise and shine, children mine," Rosalinda cooed. Eyes, yellow, hungry eyes, opened and glared at the Watcher from every corner of the room, every inch of the walls, every patch on the ceiling. And they were crawling. The Watcher felt like he was inside the world's biggest spider nest. And that was exactly what these things looked like. Spiders. Hairless, 8-legged spiders, varying in size from coin to bulldog. You know the drill. Mama needs the skin, both eyes, and 13 vertebrae. The yellow eyes were not the only things glowing in the dark anymore. Teeth were bared. Thin, sharp teeth like needles. Millions of them. The Watcher wanted to scream. He wanted to beg, apologize, cry, and swear eternal servitude. But all that came out was a gurgle. Blood was pooling around his head in a circle so perfect it looked like an aura of doom. Other than that, enjoy your dinner. Rosalinda closed the basement door. The only sound that reached her as she did so was similar to an industrial meat grinder at work, accompanied by a thin, alarmed whine. She turned around and headed back home, knowing that the very last memory of this world the Watcher took with him in the afterlife was pain. Excruciating pain. The seamstress smiled at the thought. As Rosalinda kept on walking, a black parrot flew over her head and dropped something shiny in her basket. It was a golden snake bracelet, and it was stained with blood. Fresh blood. Madame Noir didn't give it up without a fight, it seemed, for the bloodstains were almost as bright as the ruby eyes. "Thanks, Pierre," Rosalinda cheered after the bird. Pierre squawked in acknowledgement and resumed his flight back to his 10-year-old master. Yes, it was just another hot day in the Cove. The N at the end is silent, you see.
The police cruiser rumbled down the long gravel driveway, trailing a moldering cloud of dust that hung there until they left. About halfway down, there was a sign nailed to a tree that said, "If you can read this, you're in range." Depicted below this tender sentiment was a shadowed silhouette of an AR-15. Sheriff Ron Ball doubted the man at the driveway's end could actually hit him from there, but he'd sure be a fool to try. Ball couldn't hit the man from here either, but the last thing this day needed was a needless situation. Most situations Ball had found in his 20-some years of law enforcement were just that, needless. And this one was likely no different. It gave one a sense of needlessness, being a steward of solutions to needless problems. But Ball supposed someone had to do it. It was just what he was supposed to do. Deputy Dingle pointed at the clever little sign as they passed.
See that there?
Yeah, what about it?
Well, kind of funny.
I don't believe funny is the intention, Deputy.
Well, I thought you just said how you had a funny feeling about this'n.
Oh, I do, the sheriff said. After 20 years of sifting through bullshit, you get a sense when something's funny. Not funny like a clever little sign, Dingle. Funny like a criminal trying to outstrip the law. They rolled on. At the culmination of the long driveway was a little ranch house with a tar paper roof. Sheep of all sizes bleated to announce their arrival. Piccolo, tenor, baritone, and one that sounded like a busted kazoo. Stepping out of the car, Ball spotted the particular sheep in question. He knew it was the one because it looked like a busted kazoo. Dingle got out and put on his sunglasses. He only shut his door after Ball shut his. They made their way to the front door. Before the two men could get there, the screen door opened, and out stepped the man of the house. Ball noted, through his keen police instincts, that the man seemed a little uneasy, maybe even a little guilty. "Well, thank heavens," he said. Mr. Laundry," Ball said, "what seems to be the problem?" "Well, didn't they tell you?"
Laundry?
asked Dingle.
Did I hear that right?
"That's right, sir."
Well, how'd you get a name like that?
"Figure his ancestors did the laundry," Ball said.
Oh, right, that makes sense.
Laundry shifted a little uneasily. "Gentlemen, I got a situation here. I'm not sure it's time to—" "I hear you had a little run-in with an unwanted guest." "Well, yeah, that's putting it mildly," Laundry said. "But yeah, that's about the size of it." "And the fella's still here, I gather?" "That's right. Just around the corner there, in the pen." Ball gave Dingle a nod, and they followed Laundry around the side of the house. Laundry led them through a rickety little gate and into an animal pen. It appeared the pen was a kind of co-ed affair, with a number of different animals walking around. A few ducks, a threadbare sheep which didn't look much better than the busted kazoo, an unidentifiable specimen of poultry Ball took for a maladjusted turkey, and a nice little goat, perfectly black, but with a fancy little white beard. "That's the poor goat that was victimized," Laundry said. "His name's Liberace. Grade A, FFA show goat, but humble as the day is long. Even more so now, I reckon." But Ball and Dingle were not especially focused on the goat at the moment. Nearby was a shoe. The shoe itself wasn't so suspicious, but it appeared to have a foot still in it. And attached to that was a good amount of leg, a little red meat dangling out the end of it. The dirt underneath had turned brown where the blood soaked in.
Hey!
Dingle said. He clutched his stomach. "That there shoe and that leg is the guy who was assaulting poor Liberace." Dingle looked about the bar for a moment, but his Adam's apple bobbed, and he choked it back. It was well known that the deputy had a delicate stomach. "Well, goddamn, where'd the rest of 'em go?" The farmer was patting the little goat on the head and muttering words of consolation. "Don't you worry, Liberace. These men are here to take care of things. They'll make sure you get your justice." Ball approached the lonely leg and stepped on the toe of the shoe. The leg stood straight up, the bone visible in the end of it. It looked to have been sawed clean through. He took his foot off the shoe and the leg fell over again. A few ducks waddled away in disgust. "It seems like some manner of justice has already been delivered." "That fella there raped my show goat. FFA certified." "This fella here?" Ball indicated the leg.
I thought dispatch said he'd shot an intruder.
Dingle said. "That's right," Laundry cut in. "I legally and justifiably shot the man for intruding on my property. But I also have the right to seek damages against his estate for what he's done to my goat. Ain't that right, Liberace?" Ball and Dingle looked at each other, then at the goat. The goat was contentedly chewing a mouthful of grass. Laundry appeared to be chewing too, but it was just the muscles working in his jaw. "Where's the rest of them?" Ball asked. "Rest of who?" Ball gestured at the lonely leg lying in the dirt. Oh, aside the leg? The rest of 'em's over there. Laundry took the two officers around the side of the house where the pinned-in area continued. There, by a dilapidated old doghouse, was a pile of what used to be a man, but was barely identifiable as so. Beside the missing leg was a botched attempt at the removal of another. Along with that, the man seemed to have been partially field-dressed. His gut was sliced down the middle, with his victuals hanging out from whatever gristle normally kept 'em in there. Blood was everywhere. It was a mess unfit for Satan's stew pot.
Jesus!
Dingle said, his knees wobbling.
What do you... I thought you said you'd shot him.
I shot the man, that's correct. And not until I clearly identified him as a legitimate threat to my life and liberty. A goat bleated, and they turned to see Liberace coming around the corner. He walked up next to Sheriff Ball and just stood next to his leg. Ball scratched the goat on the nose.
So, this the man they say violated you, little fella?
Well, that's him all right, dirty, raping son of a bitch.
Do you know who the man is?
No, sir. I've never seen him before in my entire life.
Deputy, go ahead and check and see if he's got an ID on him.
Dingle hesitated. His Adam apple bobbed up and down.
Maybe you could do it? You're in charge, after all.
That's right, and that's why I'm questioning the suspect and scratching this goat while I'm at it.
Suspect? Snapped Laundry. The only suspect here is that one right there.
Well, I can't exactly question him, can I?
Laundry glanced at the corpse. Well, I'm only saying. The dead man still had his jeans on, and Ball noted there did indeed appear to be a bulge in his left front pocket.
Right there in the man's pocket, Deputy. Go ahead and grab that out.
I don't have any gloves on.
But I didn't say to check his prostate. I said to grab his wallet.
Resigned, Dingle took a deep breath and stiffened his upper lip. He walked to the body and squatted next to it, with his head turned. He probed the thumb and forefinger into the man's pocket and extracted a worn and bloody wallet. He held it out like a dead rat.
Bring it here, Deputy.
Laundry, Ball noted, was shifting his weight from foot to foot. After 20 years dealing with the general public, Ball had learned a thing or two about body language. Most people didn't want to talk to him at all, and the ones that did were mostly talking bull, especially the ones that looked nervous. It got old after a while, real old.
Just hold that open for me, Deputy. No sense getting both our hands dirty.
Dingle huffed. He held open the wallet displaying the expired driver's license. Chester Sims.
Oh, I know this fella,
Ball said. He compared the picture to the mess in the dirt.
Knowed him at least. Wouldn't know him for looking at him now, would you?
He's the one we brought in for stealing a month or two ago?
Yeah, he's been stealing since he was a teenager. Tell you what, though, I've never known him for a man to cornhole a show goat. Matter of fact, I don't think I've ever known any man as to one to cornhole a show goat. How about you, Deputy?
No, sir. Can't say I ever have.
Laundry, how about you? You ever known a man to cornhole a show goat? I mean, before this fella right here?
Not in a million years, he said. Ball scrutinized the man.
Well, you don't look that old to me,
he said. Ball patted the goat gently on the head. He looked it over a little bit, then straightened up and scratched under his hat band.
Deputy, does this goat look traumatized to you at all?
Traumatized, Sheriff?
You know, like it might have been made love to without express consent.
Dingle wrinkled his forehead and appraised the little goat like something on a used car lot.
Hard to say for certain, Sheriff. He looks all right to me, but it's hard to tell a goat's feelings by looking at him. The thing about goats is they got a way of just standing there.
Well, I'm no psychoanalyst, Deputy, but I'm sure if you want to find out if that goat's been fucked or not, You're going to want to have a look at that end of it.
Ball raised his chin to indicate the other end of the goat, the part you wouldn't usually give a scritch.
You saying you want me to look at its ass?
Well, I don't know where you'd fuck a goat, but I got a pretty good idea that's where this guy was thinking.
He pointed with his chin again, this time at the disemboweled corpse.
If he did indeed fuck it, that is.
I already told you that's what he did, Laundry insisted. The goat bleated, but not necessarily in agreement or disagreement.
Well, why do I have to do it?
You're the deputy. I'm the sheriff.
Well, who'd know better than you? I got no experience in that area.
Well, I'm here patting the goat on the head. How am I supposed to pat it on the head and look up its ass at the same time? I'm a sheriff, not some kind of contortionist.
Dingle huffed again, but the sheriff's reasoning was undeniable. Reluctantly, he walked around back of the goat and leaned over with his hands on his knees.
This is goddamn undignified,
he muttered.
You see anything?
Well, a goat's asshole, mostly.
Yeah? How's it look?
Dingle squinted.
Is there a way it's supposed to look? I got no frame of reference, Sheriff.
Does it look like it's been, put upon in any way? Get in there, Dingle. Get in close and have a good looky-loo.
With a note of distaste on his face, Dingle got down on his knees and got right in close to that goat's ass.
It's hard to say, Oh, shit!
Dingle fell back on his ass and elbows.
What's the matter, deputy?
Goddamn goat just shat in my...
Deputy, after what this poor goat's supposedly been through, the last thing it needs is to be made ashamed.
This is goddamn undignified.
Say, I don't know what you boys are looking for,
Laundry said.
but I assure you it's just like I said. I mean, just look at him. He don't need the stress. Poor thing's had his whole world turned upside down.
Ball looked at the goat. The goat chewed.
Well, maybe you're right. How about we just take a statement then, and let the poor fella be for a minute?
Sounds reasonable.
Deputy, you writing this down?
Dingle brushed the dirt off his trousers. He pulled a scratch pad and a pen from his back pocket.
Go ahead.
The sheriff patted the goat. It shook its tail and let out a few more pellets.
So it's your contention, Mr. Laundry, that you came outside and saw Mr. Sims here making love to your prize show goat?
He was fucking it, that's correct.
And then what happened?
Well, I seen him, and I told him to stop right there and put your hands up.
And when you said that, where were the man's hands previously?
Well, on the goat, I guess. Where else would they be?
On the goat's back? Like this?
Ball put his hands on Liberace's back. The goat bleated.
Yeah, just like that,
Laundry said.
Just exactly the way you got him now.
And what did he do when you told him that?
Well, he just kept going. Went right on fucking him. Right there in the ass. I tell you, Sheriff, I was so damn mad I could have smoked a pickle. So what's a man to do?
Ball nodded and crossed his arms.
Well, I agree with you, Mr. Laundry. I don't think there's a jury in the world would convict a man for defending his FFA show goat against such an assault.
Well, that's right. And I'd appreciate it very much if you could get this deceased person out of my goat pen.
The sheriff eyed the body, stroking his mustache in contemplation.
Just how many times did you shoot him, you said?
Well, just once, I reckon.
Just once, you said?
Yes, sir.
And he ended up like that?
Laundry looked at the mess on the ground. The flies had already started to gather on it.
Well, I must have hit him just right.
Ball was standing with his hands on his hips. He reached up to scratch under his hat band. Laundry was shifting back and forth on his feet a bit.
You, getting this, deputy?
Yes, sir. Shot him once, hit him just so.
Ball took his sunglasses off and folded them. then tucked them in his shirt pocket. He regarded the mangled man in the dirt. He looked over his shoulder, but the aforementioned shoe with the leg in it was not even visible from here.
You'll forgive me for saying so, Mr. Laundry, but I have never seen a man shot once to end up in such a condition.
308 hunting rifle. Good round. Never can say what it'll do to a body.
308. Ain't that what you used to kill that buck, Deputy?
That's right, my daddy's gun.
And when you shot it, what exactly happened to it?
Well, it started to run off, then I guess it realized it had been shot and just sat down.
Any of its legs blowed off? Nothing like that?
No, legs stayed put. Didn't shoot him nearly as good as this fella.
So you say it's possible Mr. Laundry here shot this man once, and he ended up in such a state?
Well, I'm no forensicist, but that's what the man says.
I don't see why all the suspiciousness, Laundry said. I'm just a man looking out for his goat, the same as you or anyone else would.
Well, how did you account for the one leg being so far away from the rest of them, Mr. Laundry? I can't even see it from here.
Well, the dog could have tracked it.
A dog? Must have had to be a big one. What kind of dog do you have?
Laundry wiped his nose on his shirt sleeve, then wiped his shirt sleeve on his pants.
Well, I don't have one myself. I figure one could have come through the fence.
And where is it now?
Or how it must have run off.
Run off.
Well, that's reasonable,
the deputy said. The sheriff threw Dingle a glance, the one he used to say, pay close attention, with more than just your eyes and ears. The police instinct wasn't something you were born with 2020. It was more like a little baby you had to raise to adulthood.
Well, sir, I'm willing to entertain the idea that some cosmic anomaly caused this man to disintegrate the way he did when you shot him just once with that rifle. See, in my line of work, you're apt to come across all sorts of little curiosities. Ain't that right, Deputy Dingle?
Well, that's right, Sheriff. Every morning I wake up and think to myself I'm apt to see something curious today. And most of the time that fact bears out.
See, all I have trouble wrapping my mind around is that a fellow would do such a terrible thing to such an adorable little show goat. It's just unconscionable.
The goat bleated in agreement.
Well, we're in agreement there, Sheriff. It's a goddamn abomination. That's why I did my civic duty and put him down when I could.
Which is why I aim to make sure no jury might see things otherwise, thereby putting you, Mr. Laundry, a moral paragon and model citizen, in any potential legal dilemma, by conducting a thorough investigation, of course.
Ball felt a tug at his trousers and saw Liberace had begun to nibble on him. He patted the goat on the head and pulled his pants loose.
Deputy, do me a favor and go and have a look at that fella's pecker there.
What? Whose pecker? You mean the chickens?
Well, the dead fella. Just go pull it out. See if it's got goat shit on it.
A pause.
You pulling my leg, Sheriff?
Ball shook his head.
Afraid our county is woefully short in the forensics department. Inevitably, some of that responsibility falls on us. But maybe Mr. Laundry over here could save you the trouble anyway. What do you think, Laundry? If I have Deputy Dingle here pull the man's Peter out, you think it'll have any evidence on it?
Laundry's eyes were wide.
You mean to pull out the man's Peter?
He was shifting faster on his feet now. Looked like he was holding back a gallon of pee.
You got something you want to say, Mr. Laundry?
Laundry took a deep breath and restored his resolve.
I do not. I already told you what happened.
Ball sighed.
Dingle, go fish out the man's Peter. If it's still remaining, that is. With Laundry's exceptional rifle here, it might have ended up somewhere else entirely.
Barehanded? But Sheriff!
No need to be so formal, Deputy. Police work is dirty business.
Damn it, just undignified.
Dingle steeled himself and kneeled again by the body. Turning away, he seized the zipper of the jeans and yanked at it, losing his grip several times from the blood. Finally, with it pinched firmly between his fingernails, he was able to zip it down. He looked back at Bell.
Go ahead. It won't bother him any.
Well, I'm not worried about him being bothered.
Dingle, with a look on his face like he were reaching into an unflushed toilet, fished around in the man's fly until he unseated the bloodless, flaccid prick. Once he had it out, he recoiled, clutching the offending hand to his chest. Then he wiped his hand on his pants and stuck it in his pocket. He turned away and heaved.
Well, how's it look, Dingle? Look like it's been up a goat's ass?
You can't tell by looking at it.
Well, have a look at it.
I said I looked at it. Have a look yourself. I'm not feeling so hot.
Ball ambled over and looked down at the man's pud. There was really no way of telling whether it had been anywhere inappropriate. Not by looking at it. Dingle was right. Bill returned to where he'd previously been standing and patted the goat on the head.
So far, our investigation remains inconclusive,
He said.
Well, can't you just take my word for it? I told you all I know.
Ball stroked his mustache.
We'll need to move this up the chain of investigational procedurism is all. Soon as my deputy gets his bearings there. You all right there, deputy?
Ungoddamn dignified,
Dingle said.
Maybe so, but a man's life hangs in the balance, deputy.
Man's deader than shit, Sheriff. Only thing I see hanging's his pecker.
It's not his life I'm talking about, deputy. It's innocent old Mr. Laundry I'm worried about. If it turned out we couldn't prove Mr. Sims here was indeed guilty as charged, then where would that leave poor Mr. Laundry? In a steaming heap of trouble for all we know.
Laundry's face went white when he heard that part.
Well, damn it, fellas. What do I gotta do?
You've already done what you had to do. Now Deputy Dingle's got to get down there and examine the suspect's wiener a little more. Got to sniff it for evidence.
What?
Dingle had half a smile on his face, but it quickly straightened out as he realized Ball wasn't joking.
You can't expect me to do that, Sheriff. I'm no sniffer of men's Peters, live or deceased. Besides, I got no frame of reference.
The hell you don't. Very same goat here just took a frame of reference right in front of you. All you got to do is have a sniff and see if the aromas match up.
Oh, hell.
Laundry said.
Is that really necessary?
Unless you got something else to tell me, Mr. Laundry. Anything might have initially slipped your mind, maybe?
I most certainly do not. I told you boys what happened, and that's all I got to tell you.
Ball took out his shades and put them back on. He took a step toward where Laundry was standing. A little mourning dove flew out of a locust tree and lighted on the fence.
You told us something, all right. For 20 years now, that's all people have been telling me. Something. Whatever they think is going to make their problems go away. Or just make me go away. The minute you walk in a room, people start changing what they want to tell you. Nowadays, seems like the second I pin on this badge, someone's waiting to feed me a line of crap.
He took another step closer to Laundry.
And I think that's what you're doing to me right now.
Oh, hell.
Laundry waved a hand in dismissal, but his eyes showed something different. Ball took his shades back off and looked him dead in the eye.
See, I'd hate for the grand jury to get an idea you lied to the police about any of this. If that were the case, they might even deem this an unjustified shooting. And who knows what'd come of that? Life in prison? Death penalty? The way I see things, Laundry, is this man either fucked your goat, or you went and fucked yourself. And I mean to find out which one. And that's why Deputy Dingle here is going to have to suck that man's dead dick, just to check if it tastes like goat shit.
Wait, what?
Oh, hell.
Laundry looked different all of a sudden, a little like he was going to cry.
How about now, Laundry? You got something you want to tell me?
Laundry's jaw was really working now. A fella like him could only bear so much on his conscience. And by the state of the half-disassembled body nearby, Ball knew he hadn't the capacity to bear this one out.
Fuck.
Laundry said.
It's like you said. This fellow was fixing to steal a chicken. I got him doing it before. It just gets me so mad, that's all. Another man thinking he's justified to take property. But after I realized what I'd done, I tried to...
You tried to make it all go away, and when you found you didn't have the stomach for it, you went ahead and called me. Good old Sheriff Ball, come down here and clean up your mess. That right?
Laundry looked away. The goat bleated, and Sheriff Ball scratched it under its chin. He looked back at Deputy Dingle, gave him a little grin. The look on Dingle's face was plain astonishment. The little dove cooed disinterestedly and flew back into the tree. Ball guessed it had been rooting to see Dingle go the distance. He had to wonder how long this investigation might have gone on if either Laundry or Dingle had the stomach for what they'd signed up for.
What's it even matter?
Laundry said.
Beg your pardon?
Asked Ball. Laundry took a deep breath, wiped his nose on the back of his sleeve.
You know, I've been farming this land since before you were even Sheriff. And sometimes it feels like I'm only holding the spot for the next fella that's stupid enough to farm it.
Now, what do you mean by that?
You raise chickens. The coyotes get half of them. You grow crops. The rabbits eat half of them. Whatever you end up with, the government takes half of it.
He shook his head.
I used to get upset about things, but not so much nowadays. Because when it comes down to it, we're all just playing our parts. This fella here, he was supposed to steal a chicken. Because that's what chicken stealers do. And I figure I was supposed to shoot him. Because that's just what I ended up doing. And I'm sorry for lying, Sheriff, but it's just like you said. We lied to you because that's just what we gotta do to keep playing our parts. Like some big pointless game that just keeps going and growing. And no one ever wins because the game never ends. And no one calls foul because the game itself is foul. And it doesn't matter how good or bad you play, because when you're done playing, you're done playing. And there's another one's right behind you, waiting to take your place. Another farmer, another sheriff, another chicken thief. And nothing in between makes a damn bit of difference.
The three men just stood there for a minute. It seemed no one wanted to be the next to talk. Only the soft sounds of the animals in their pens, the chickens scratching in the dirt, the crickets in the brush beyond the fence. The goat chewed. The man on the ground, eviscerated as he were, just kind of laid there with his dick out. Liberace was the one who broke the silence. The sheriff came out of his reverie and patted the little goat on the head. He'd always wondered what exactly goats were trying to say when they bleated like that. They seemed perfectly happy, just chewing, looking around, shitting every so often, and once in a while they'd bleat. It had taken them 20 years to realize it, but suddenly Ball knew exactly what the goats were trying to say. They were saying, "Fuck it," and Ball found he couldn't agree more. The sheriff cleared his throat.
You keep hogs, Laundry?
Hogs? Yeah, I got hogs. Pig pens just on the other side of the house. Why?
Curious creatures they are. Eat just about anything they see. Damnedest thing. I've seen them eat their own even. Skin, bones, teeth, everything. I've wondered about that. But I guess that's just what hogs do.
A pause. A tacit understanding.
You figure your hogs might be able to, tidy up around here?
Laundry raised an eyebrow, turned to the mess and back to the sheriff.
Now that you mention it, hypothetical, of course, I suppose if given the opportunity, they just might. If that were to happen, in a manner of speaking, of course.
Ball straightened up and nodded to the deputy. Some of the color had come back into his face. He turned back to Laundry.
Maybe you ought to let 'em stretch their legs a bit. Fraternize with the ducks and chickens and even old Liberace here.
Laundry nodded.
That's a fine idea, Sheriff.
Any thoughts, Dingle?
Dingle appeared to mull on that for a moment, then said,
A little gray area, I'd say, Sheriff.
I'd say so too, but I've come to believe that that's where the game is played.
The three men looked at each other. A questionable triumvirate right under the wide open sky, beyond which the trillions of stars and all their planets revolved without a hitch. There were no lightning bolts from the heavens. No one struck down. Not even a peep from the dove in the locust tree. Ball looked down at the goat, but Liberace offered no disagreement.
He's a pretty goat, Mr. Laundry.
Well, thank you. FFA certified.
Well, keep an eye out nobody fucks 'em.
Will do, Sheriff Ball. You two take care now.
Without a word, Ball and Dingle made their way back to the cruiser and got inside. Ball put his key in the ignition and just sat there a second. From between his thighs came a sound almost otherworldly, an unabashed crackling fart that went on an uncommonly long time. The men's eyes met, but not a word passed between them. There were no words left that needed saying. Ball put the cruiser in drive, and the two men went back up the driveway.
Just a little misunderstanding,
Ball said into his radio.
Yeah, no worries at all. Copy that. All right now.
Autumn was just setting in, and though it was early afternoon, the sun had already passed its apex in the sky. The leaves had lost their luster, and the dry dead ones crinkled under the wheels and spun in the wheel wells. Out on the main drag, there was a little dead dove on the roadside the sheriff was pretty sure he hadn't seen on the way in. One of its wings twitched, like the bird's dying effort to wave goodbye, or give them the finger perhaps. The sheriff had never known a dove to do such a thing, but every day was filled with curiosities. A million light years away, a star exploded. An earthquake shook the alien terrain of some uninhabited world no one even knew about. And all over the sprawling circle of the earth, there were acts of impropriety so dastardly even Laundry couldn't have thought them up himself. The liars were lying, the stealers were stealing, and some sick son of a bitch had his pecker up a showgoat's ass. Somewhere. But not here. Not today.
Say, Sheriff,
Dingle asked.
you weren't really gonna make me do that back there, were you?
Back where?
Ball said.
Darkness coats nearly the entire room. A comfort blanket of emptiness, in which only a small nightlight in the shape of a tacky, golden elephant pierces through the inky blackness. I stretch my long limbs languorously, clawed fingers scraping against the high ceiling as I study my surroundings. The room is dominated by a large king-size bed, two forms lying in the center. The first one is a well-built male, softly snoring and clearly deep in the throes of sleep. He doesn't interest me. The second, though, a slender female, lies rigidly, eyes open wide, and darting around the room. Looking, I know, for me. She can sense me somewhere in the blackness and knows what is about to happen to her, just as she knows, after so many years, that she can do nothing to prevent it. Closing my eyes, I feel a tremendous surge of power seeping from my fingers, as an invisible flow of the paralyzing agent used for centuries by my race drifts like a black, thick smoke towards the occupants lying in the bed. The male, of course, is immune and completely unaware of my presence.
But the female, my true target, senses the danger and makes a desperate attempt to get up and flee. But it's already too late. Surely she knows this. This is a dance that she and I have performed countless times in her short, mortal life. She is not immune, and no matter what she does to try to prevent her fate, it will always find her. I will always find her. Her eyes widen to what must surely be a painful degree, and the first sweet blast of her terror hits me square in the chest. Watching her expressive face, I can almost feel the tingle of static energy as it seeps into her toes, up her spine, and finally come to rest in the deepest region of her brain. She is mine now, utterly at my mercy, and she knows this. I continue watching as a dull resignation settles over her. Jessica, I purr. I have missed you. It's been so long. As soon as the words leave my jagged lips, Jessica's eyes finally focus in on my vicinity. A small breathy sound escaping from her clenched jaw. I know that she can't quite see me yet, standing hunched in the corner of her bedroom. I take a small step closer to the dim glow of the ugly nightlight. I have missed you terribly. But for some strange reason, I get the impression that the feeling is just not mutual. You managed to shut me out so much longer this time. The pills, the therapy, all those breathing and relaxation exercises, all to treat your condition. Sleep paralysis, I believe it is now referred to in your highly enlightened age. I take another step, savoring the moment. Yes, I know all about your treatments. The medication and sleep studies, all those misguided attempts to keep us apart. I confess, I am a bit wounded. We've been together nearly your entire life, and it's time you finally accepted that we'll always be together. Or at least until I've wrung the very last breath from your ungrateful body. Can't you understand? I need you too much. You keep me nourished. Your horror and fear sustain me as nothing else can. Why would you begrudge your oldest, dearest friend what they need to survive? It's cruel. It's selfish. Hearing the menace bleed into my tone, I pause in mid-step as a loud, sudden snort emanates from the male lying next to her. And this must be David, your fiancé now, I understand. He's a big, strapping young man, and a sleep therapist as well, correct? Your sleep therapist. Sounds like he may be taking his responsibilities a bit too far, though. Surely he knows that he's not actually supposed to sleep with his patients. But I suppose I can understand the attraction to you. Surely such a large, capable man like him can keep you safe from the darkness, from me. Why don't you ask him for help? Go ahead. I will wait right here. Her eyes with their deep blue irises and grossly contracted pupils slide slowly over to the man sleeping beside her. She stares pleadingly at him, as best she can without turning her head. A tiny, pathetic croak is all she can push through her stiff throat. After a moment of these tense silence, her wide eyes shift back to mine once more. No? I ask, as I take another slow step, drawing ever closer to the bed. See, I knew you still cared. I'm always watching you, Jessica. I'm in your head, your very psyche, and I've consumed enough of your being to know your every weakness, every dark thought you've ever whispered to the night. When you thought you were alone.
I was there.
Always listening. Remember all the good times we've shared together. The countless nights you've given so graciously of your pain, your life force. My mind flashes back to the first time I saw her, when she was just a young, naive child of 6, maybe 7. Too young to understand the complexity of what I am, but old enough to see the wrongness, the terror of it all. Her innocence and purity were the sweetest aphrodisiac I had ever experienced in my prolonged existence. I had come to her for the very first time then, aware that at the mercy of a paralytic agent, she would be powerless against me. But unprepared for the ferocity of the pleasure and strength that her fear would give me. I fed, and fed well that first night, drawing out her anguish for the entirety of the night, relenting only when the first stray glimmers of dawn approach. I have fed off so many souls in my time, but no other human satiated my hunger like she did. I have no concept of why, only knew that her essence strengthened me in a way that nothing else ever had. I admit that I became a bit obsessed with her, ignoring any other opportunities to feed, few as they were, saving my voracious appetite only for her. I knew that I was taking too much, but couldn't seem to stop myself. I watched her grow weaker, more lifeless each time I drank from her. Most likely, she would have died if she hadn't sought out help. But finally she did. And though the treatments had blocked me out for several months, it was inevitable that I would eventually creep back in. Nothing could keep the darkness at bay forever. Perhaps it was this obsession that caused me to feel the need to unburden myself to her, to tell her things that I had never uttered to any other human.
It's not your fault, really.
But that of the first humans, your early ancestors, interlopers. We were the earliest of God's creation, His beloved children. We too lived, loved, and reveled in the world, free to do as we pleased, live as we pleased. Whole beings who danced in the light and indulged freely in the souls of other, weaker forms the great Creator had provided for our consumption. Those creatures were not unlike the cattle and livestock that your race survives on. Yes, I once held a solid, physical form much like your own. But soon we began to crave more, need more. We soon began feasting off of each other's fears and torment. the ultimate taboo. In order to further strengthen our own bodies. Eventually, the Creator grew disappointed with us in our primitive and violent urges to satisfy only ourselves, regardless of the pain we inflicted on each other. He cast us out of the light and out of this world, only to see us writhe in the black, unwhole and unworthy. And then he created you to replace us. The race of mankind became his final, desperate attempt at perfection, but he failed. I take several swifter steps towards the girl, my rage getting the better of me. It is in that darkness that we have survived, barely able to exist off those few humans. He nearly spat the word so hated as it was by those of his kind. That small portion of them who were susceptible to our powers. Those who lacked the natural blockers that would render them immune to our abilities. In the beginning, less than 2% of the entire population of your race had this anomaly that left mere thousands to feed many millions. Do you understand? There were far too few of you to go around, and millions of us starved. Went so mad with hunger that they willingly ended their miserable existence. First, my mother, then my mate, and eventually even my daughter. All lost throughout the countless centuries. Your God did this to us on purpose. His Holiness just couldn't condone wiping out an entire species that he once created so lovingly. In his great benevolence, he would never bathe his white hands in blood. In creating such a tiny percentage of you with the necessary genetic predisposition, or as your useless fiancé there would call it, sleep paralysis. He gave us a chance to survive, certainly, but only at the cost of nearly my whole race. The whole time, he must have known that all he really did was prolong our eventual demise and cause us all eternal suffering. It was his final gift to us, and it became our greatest curse. I was almost to the bed now, so close that I could smell the sickly sweet scent of her terror. I inhale deeply and smile. In her growing sense of panic, her eyes and nostrils flared as quick, tiny puffs of air pushed past her lips. I paused, taking a moment to calm myself. It was suddenly imperative that I finish my story before I lost all control. Do you know, I was very close to giving up, ready to face my end, when I first laid eyes on you. You were so young, so full of hope and promise. You reminded me much of my own lost child, and for a time, I even felt guilty for taking so deeply of your life force. But the strength, the euphoria it gave me quickly overcame any misplaced empathy. Were it not for you creatures, my family would still be alive and be first in God's love. Nearly giddy now with anticipation, I quickly close the small gap between us and watch her eyes fill with terror.
And I smile.
Feeling the bones shift and my jaw unhinge with the unnatural wideness of it. As I knew it would, the hideousness of my grin brought out a fresh wave of delicious horror that I quickly devoured. All of your science and enlightenment is so wasted and ignorant. You refuse to see the wisdom that those before understood for centuries. You are not diseased and therefore cannot be cured. Rather, you are cursed, chosen by God to provide for my kind. I had to hunch down several feet, nearly kneeling in an effort to reach her ear as I whispered, "Your ancestors knew what we are, though they soon forgot our true origins. They believed mistakenly that the first of our kind, Lilith, was Adam's first wife, banished to make room for Eve. Although symbolically this was true, we in point of fact preceded Adam. We were the first beloved creations of God, a chosen people who enjoyed the ease and luxury of his favor. But our crimes against each other eventually became too great, too numerous for him to ignore. And so he cast out our entire race to make room for you. You cannot know the bleak despair, the desperation that comes from being so utterly forsaken, from having
everything you are and all that you love torn so irrevocably from your grasp.
But you will soon." Ever so methodically, I stalk my long razor-sharp nails across her chest as I speak those last few words in a sing-song voice, puncturing tiny holes into her very soul and causing small streams of it to dance slowly up to my starving lips. I inhale her essence, dragging it deeply into my rotting lungs. Suddenly, with a preternational speed far too fast for her inferior senses to track, I straddled her slender body, growing more ravenous at the first small taste of her aura. I rake my long nails more deeply down the length of her chest, feeling the rendering of her soul as I did so. As always, I knew I would leave no physical marks. There would be no evidence of my assault, if and when she finally woke, because I wasn't cleaving her flesh, but rather the deepest marrow of her life. I nearly cackled at the scent of her pain as it reached me. The Night Mara, they used to call us. Wretched creatures who fed off soul, breath, and blood. We are the basis of every night creature of your lore. Vampires, succubi, and demons. But sadly, throughout the centuries, the true nature of our kind has been lost. We, who are the authors of everything your kind fears, every bump in the night and growl in the darkness, were relegated to nothing more than dreams, and the Night Mara would eventually become your nightmares. Lost in the ecstasy of the feeding, I savagely dig my claws into her body, as deeply as they can go, and then roughly twist my fingers. Jessica reacts in the only way she is able, whimpering softly through clenched teeth. If only you hadn't tried so hard in your attempts to keep me from you, denied me to the brink of starvation, then perhaps I could have satisfied myself with a small taste, just a sampling of your agony. But now, I cannot control my hunger. Tonight, I have no choice but to gorge myself on the banquet laid out so temptingly before me. Another tiny gargled sound escapes her as numerous tentacle-like straws slither their way out of my gray, concave chest and burrow deep into the holes that my claws had made. The tentacles instantly start contracting as they begin to greedily milk the life from her. I choke back an ecstatic moan as I feed directly from her consciousness. Looking her straight in the eye, I watch as a single solitary tear emerges from her tightly closed eyelids. Ever so slowly, I lean down to lick at it with my long forked tongue. Don't cry, my sweet, not now, for you have yet to hear the best part of my tale. For so long we have fought amongst ourselves over the pitiful few of you, whose spirits we were able to consume. We have been reduced to nothing more than wolves, savages, and starving dogs fighting to the death, for nothing more than a miserable table scrap. But after countless millennia of watching you pathetic and weak creatures, I have come to a rather unsettling but also welcome conclusion. Humans really aren't so different from the nightmare. Much as it pains me to say it, both of the species are parasites, monstrous and selfish beasts who feed off the weak and sickly. With every generation that passes, your kind becomes more like us and less like him. And almost overnight, it seemed there were suddenly great numbers of humans being born with this lack of immunity. It was far too steep a climb to be mere coincidence. For the first time since the dawn of your history, my kind feeds, and it feeds well. We have begun to prosper once again. We know the cause, even if your race is too arrogant and naive to see it. Tears begin to flow more freely from her eyelids, and I watch gleefully as comprehensions begin to dawn on her face. Yes, you do understand now, don't you? Mankind has grown nearly identical to my kind. You crush the weak, delight in your ability to destroy all goodness, and in your own way, you even feed off each other in your attempts to gain power. We have taken notice, and so has he. Your God gave you everything, all the freedoms and comforts that he once offered only to us, and you have squandered it, just as we did. But, as I said before, God can't condone the wanton destruction of those he has created. And so he has chosen to wake you up, one soul at a time, until eventually we will reach you all. Consume every last one of you. And all of this with his blessing. It would appear that even in our hideousness, he prefers us to you. You'll soon know our pain, our despair, and you will know it quite intimately. It is unlikely that she will survive this night. My thirst is so great, and my will too weak. I can't help but feel that I would be doing her a favor, a small mercy to end it for her here and now. For if not, she would soon come to suffer the complete desolation of the Forsaken, along with the rest of mankind. It seemed somehow less cruel to just put her out of her misery. But either way, it really doesn't matter. There are now so much more of the curse to go around, and I will easily find another susceptible to the paralysis. But as for tonight, she is my prey, and I have only just begun the feast. My smile slowly widens. My name is David, and I was engaged to a sweet, beautiful woman named Jessica. She died last night. The doctors all say that it was a heart attack. A painless and easy passing in her sleep. Maybe. Hopefully that's all it was. I awoke early this morning from the darkest, most graphic nightmare of my life to find her lying cold and stiff next to me. Her frozen fingers were stretched, resting less than a centimeter from my own hand, almost as if in the last few seconds of her life she'd reached out to me. Jessica had suffered from sleep paralysis nearly her entire life. That's how we met, in fact. You see, I'm a sleep therapist, and she had the most debilitating case of the disease that I had ever seen. Over the many hours we spent together, I couldn't help but fall in love with her. And she was getting better. It had been several months, in fact, since she had an episode. But last night, the nightmare I had, well, I was the demon in the story. I saw and felt everything from his point of view, and just as he predicted, Jessica did die. And the preceding story had been an exact account of the dream that I had that night. Now, I've always been a man of science. I don't believe in the paranormal or demons, and I certainly don't believe that our nightmares can hurt us. Or at least I didn't. But this creature, or whatever he was right about one more thing, and it haunts me most of all. In the past 5 years, the reported incidence and severity of sleep paralysis have nearly tripled. Medical science has no real explanation as to why. What if everything that happened last night, if it wasn't a dream, but a warning?
Interesting times came to the city of many names, namely the old capital. King Minji's bastard son, Larry, mounted the throne on the second Friday of the month of the dead, 9 days of state mourning after the old king succumbed to advanced years and white-hot iron shoved up his ass. Long live the king. Sunday evening, a buxom maid tended the royal instrument, while 2 of her cohorts pinned young Larry's skinny arms. A 4th sawed off his head. His Majesty should have been using it more assiduously. Long live the king. Monday afternoon witnessed a blaze of trumpets and the flourish of banners to commemorate the ascension of King Richard Creeley IV to the Lion Throne. Fresh graffiti in Bowl Cutter Alley declared, "Dick is king," something few would argue against, except for whomever had scribbled, "Off with his head," and "Kick" against the pricks. 2 figures lurked at the far end of the alley, a popular rendezvous for nefarious sorts. A short man and a tall, toadish something other than man, at least a broadaxe haft wide. These worthies regarded the piss wall and its timely message. "The maids are dealt with," the small one said to the wall. Sneaky Bob wore a ragged cloak and boots, but a fancy doublet and hose beneath. He'd come directly from his apartments above one of the city's finer brothels, which, not coincidentally, had provided the maids who ushered King Larry into the underworld. "How dealt is dealt," Walter Neck said. Words emerged from the wattles of his throat as a rusty blade grinds forth from its sheath. As a consequence, while he often spoke at length, he seldom raised his voice, and seldom needed to do so. "Bought a bit of bay, chained to an anchor," Sneaky Bob said. "Cut him and dumped him over the side myself." His smirk projected the idea that he didn't favor women, despite, or because of, his close association with them. "This is good to hear." Neck's physiognomy appeared toadish because he was in fact an toad, which meant he was a venerable exemplar of toad kind, yet infinitely more. The gods had gifted supreme among animals, with speech and reasoning, and empathy toward humanity that did not necessarily equal love. Possessed of the relative mass of a grizzly bear, Neck moved slowly and ponderously, except for those moments when he didn't. He favored a moldering black coyote pelt, skinned from Prowl, king of the coyotes, and horrid cork boots of amphibian leather, though he required neither furs nor boots. He also carried a notched khopesh forged from a petrified slab of wood, equally unnecessary unless he wished to fell a small tree or quarter an elk, which he sometimes did. At the moment, he regarded his human companion and waited with patience honed from eons of cautious observance. Were as savage as any beast. Humans were masters of treachery. One could never be too safe around a man, especially a man who despised his fellows. Many hands made light work of a coup d'etat. Sneaky Bob's mitts had gotten particularly dirty. He'd arranged the most intimate details of the royal assassination, and several others that followed. High Lords decreed the time and place. Bob had selected who and how. Meanwhile, Walter Neck's task in the grand scheme of political reorganization was to resolve delicate personal matters, mainly overseeing the severance of certain employees. Bob was the last name on Neck's list. "I pray the Seneschal is satisfied." Sneaky Bob referred to the king's right-hand hatchet man, Seneschal Geld. The Seneschal owed Sneaky Bob a knapsack of golden lions for services rendered, which meant, as the Seneschal's agent in this matter, Neck owed Sneaky Bob a knapsack of golden lions. Forebodingly, there was neither knapsack nor gold on Neck's person. "The kingdom is grateful for your sacrifice." The Toad's thin lips' smile broadened. He rotated his unnervingly prodigious cranium to orient upon his tiny compatriot. "'Twas nothing," Sneaky Bob said, between one breath and the next. He was nothing. Come rosy-nippled dawn, Neck expelled shreds of a raggedy cloak, fancy doublet, and hose into the gutter of Eyeball Passage. This alley bored into the mountain's spine. The mountain carried the city upon its back. Stalactites oozed evil rainwater. Friezes depicted leering amphibian horrors, exceedingly toad-like, that once dwelt below. Primitive tribes of men carved them, and worse. Wind gusted through the alley. Dead leaves from the royal park whirled around his shoulders and added their number to the bed of mulch and slime and fossilized skeletons of animals and men. He waddled forth to get drunk at a tavern and cogitate upon what he suspected to be his own imminent doom. The Jackdaw Tavern was one of a baker's dozen similarly designated establishments scattered around the old capital. This being the month of the dead, and thus against custom to sally forth sans costume, the proprietor assumed Neck's awful visage to be an artfully crafted mask. Neck rented a cell on the second floor. He licked a vat of curds and pleasured himself desultorily. The curds were fermented from the tainted blood milk of rats that dwelt in the sewers. The rats surfaced at night to steal garbage and strip inebriated vagrants to the bone. Neck was old as the measure such things, perhaps old as rocks and trees measure such things. He recalled but fragments of his voluminous history. Had his existence always been so squalid? He committed an array of dirty deeds for meager pay, hatchet jobs, murder, mayhem, skullduggery, prostitution. He made a terrible prostitute. His bidder's organ followed its own star, and Neck was down to mate whenever the opportunity presented itself. Alas, altering sex taxed the toad, and he usually went into hibernation upon accomplishing the deed. He squatted before a minor altar to Joad, patron deity of toads great and small, and other, less savory creatures of the bogs and swamps. This was a wooden effigy, nothing akin to the colossal mural in the Hall of Doom that depicted insatiable Joad as a behemoth, its tongue drooling down to the dirt, scores of men caught fast in its barbs like flies dying in amber. Not a popular deity, to be sure. Hours burned away as Neck stoically awaited word from Seneschal Geld as per his instructions. The two had met in the flesh but once. Many years gone by when the Seneschal swam with the little pollywogs at the court of good King Minji. Oh, how times had changed. A man of Geld's current status did not treat personally with mercenary scum, lest it be by dead of night and in the presence of numerous heavily armed guards. Therefore, Neck anticipated contact with a trusted emissary of the Seneschal, i.e., a professional murderer. That's how the Great Web and its functionaries worked. One man to arrange assassinations, and then to murder the assassins. Another man to liquidate the first fellow, and a third to take care of him. Where would it all end? With a knock on the door and an envenomed dagger stabbed through his slow-beating heart, is what Neck suspected. Seneschal Geld preferred loose threads to be snipped. The powerful always did. Shadows of clouds moved against the window. The gray gloom of his niche blackened at the edges and curled inward until only the last trace of light glimmered in the pitiless rhinestone eyes of the idol. Where will it end indeed? The altar of Joad whispered from many directions at once. That voice, like the creak of sun-whitened leather, sounded as familiar as Neck's own. For you, it ends in a pot of bubbling oil and seasonal spices, unless divine providence intervenes. Have you been keen? Have you said your prayers? I haven't heard from you since that sticky incident with the Croatoans. Neck had been neither keen nor faithful. The only prayers he'd attended were those of his victims, who occasionally babbled for mercy before their pitiable souls were snatched into the underworld. He also attended the gurgling of his bowels, where damned souls occasionally simmered and stewed. You've done it now. The oppression of Minji had grown intolerable. Neck quoted the sentiment of nobles and peasants who chafed under the old king's increasingly burdensome yoke. But why now, small fry? May as well ask why a man peels a scab. It's an impulse. You're no man. Yet here I squat in his rude habitation, observing his customs, digesting his humor and habit, no less. Thanks to your meddling, the kingdoms of men shall endure naught but woe. Dick will see to it. Verily, King Dick represented an existential threat to peasants and paupers everywhere his scabrous hand extended. Cruel beyond the usual measure, even for a mortal tyrant, who were forced to pack every conceivable inequity into their flea-spanned lives. The king would happily usher in a new dark age of fire and destruction and political whoredom. You're quite welcome, Neck said, drunk on the vile curds and his own rank fatalism. Consider it a favor. Down with the primates, eh? Don't presume to do me any favors. Perhaps you bear these primates enmity. I rather enjoy their antics. Joad's altar emanated a suggestive slurp. Easy for a god older than the mountains to adopt a sanguine view. It had presided when creation was a soupy mess that spanned pole to pole. It had known worms and mollusks and trilobites as supplicants. It would persist for eons after other life forms gave way to cockroaches scurrying beneath a reddening sun. Meanwhile, the blight known as mankind spread across the countenance of the earth, virulent as mold to the meat of an overripe peach. Men slew those who came before, or drove them into the low caverns where neither celestial light nor rain were ever felt. The such as Neck, risked much to walk abroad. His mostly extinct kind did so only by the forbearance of lords of men. Perforce served human princes and kings as advisors and executioners, and, alas, toadies. You are despised, it is true, the wooden god said. Those who know their history fear you. Those who know you fear you, hate you, even Geld. Especially Geld. Especially Dick. If they only knew how little they know, Neck said to the altar, to himself. A coal ignited in his belly, dull and dim, then rapidly brightening to the incandescent heat of a torturer's best iron. His eyes teared, and for the first time in epochs, he heard the north wind sighing through the reeds of his distant home estuary. He smelled the brine of tidal water, and he smelled green bird shit. The altar fattened on liquid darkness and his misery. Long had Neck harbored greedy phantoms of inconsolable yearning and pitiless regret. Long and longer had he suffered guilt and self-reproach like perpetual festering wounds. When you were voiding your bowels in eyeballed passage this lovely morn, did you perchance hearken the clink of a mostly dissolved vial as it vented from your nether port and rolled into the gutter? I fancy Bob carried a bottle of scent. My innards smell quite pleasant, I trow. Bob did not carry a bottle of scent. Bob carried a vial of rare and deadly poison called a sanguine dream eater, several drops of which he intended to spice your curds at the first chance. Few natural poisons or venoms upon the gods' good earth could affect the constitution of iron-gutted Neck. He was, so far as he had reason to believe by dint of brutal experience, immune to the worst effects of every foul, toxic material devised by man or nature, except ennui. Indeed, when aroused, he exuded a toxic slime capable of inducing a hypnogenic state, nausea, and death. Victims reported an orgy of phantasmal imagery prior to their demise. Who would provide Bob such a rare potion for foul purpose? Someone who wishes to send you home. Someone wise enough to know you don't poison an Ur-toad. Nay, the Ur-toad. You poison reality itself. The ultimate trip. My guess? A king, or his seneschal. It was a rhetorical question. Neck understood precisely what had befallen him. He'd been commanded to destroy Sneaky Bob and leave no trace. The seneschal, knowing full well the manner in which Neck typically essayed the disappearance of his victims, would snip 2 loose ends for the price of 1. Of vivid hallucinations, the first stage? Neck waved his paw and his claws briefly multiplied. Time is a ring. You will meet the terrible shadow on high once more. I am sorry it has come to this. That makes two of us. Tell me what I must do, oh hopping god. Though it sounded familiar, Neck couldn't remember the precise connotation of the terrible shadow on high. The phrase smacked of mystical gobbledygook, used to frighten peasants. Mighty Joad? Hello? The altar spoke no more, although a strong reek of bog remained in the garret. Neck vomited a steaming pile of curds. He lighted a candle and blearily contemplated the mess with the concentration of a haruspex. A distant screech resounded, and again, closer. Green light seeped through the window. Shadows dissolved. The gaseous, swampy stench thickened, and the ceiling boards creaked. He looked up, into the annihilating center of the universe. A plethora of horrors crept forth to mingle with gentle folk during the month of the dead. Costumes, grease paint, glamour, and expectations concealed the true nature of these entities. First, Neck had entered the Jackdaw Tavern, his hideous form unremarked upon by neither proprietor nor patrons. Some time later, 5 men of the Flat Affect arrived, accompanied by a young woman. The men were likewise treated with affable diffidence, despite their most unwholesome physiognomies. Common folk scarcely recognized them for what they truly were, particularly in broad daylight. The white ones tended to lurk at the twilight margins, given to haunting lakeside cabins, abandoned asylums, and rural knolls popular with lust-crazed teenagers. None could authoritatively derive the origin of these creatures. Rumors abounded. They had died, as mortal men usually do, then were reassembled and resurrected by the gods of death. Or they were mortal men, perfectly alive, but enslaved by enchanted masks. Or they were an immortal servitor species, marooned when their star-faring ship crashed on Earth, and now emerged from crevices at the bidding of eminent black magicians, such as Julie V, Satan's own bitch, and John Foot, erstwhile warlock to the imperial court. Whatever the truth of their provenance, men of the Flat Affect, or White Ones, resembled typical men, except for visages sickly pale as clabbered milk, an unnerving rictus and shambling gait that covered more ground than an untutored observer might warrant. The Pale Society, as scholars designated their plurality, was divided between the ecstatics, whose evil grins permanently curved unto their ears, and the Stoics, who were blank and cold as the very snows. Men of the Flat Affect spoke solely to lure victims from sanctuary and into darkness. They possessed no scrutable motivations, save a love of sadism and murder. This cruelty consisted of 3 ecstatics and 2 Stoics, each yoked in servitude to the aforementioned young woman, Delia Labrador. Delia wore a woolen cloak and a gemstone-encrusted domino mask. Her lips were blackened with ash. She sat at a table near the hearth, her scaly sandals propped most cavalierly. The White Ones loomed around her, their eyes gleaming with dispassionate malice. Delia inquired of the proprietor whether he'd seen anyone interesting. She sought a man of superior bulk and rude countenance, a man who smelled of alkaline, and the blood caked on his boots. The proprietor pointed directly overhead and confessed he'd rented a cell to precisely such an enormous brute. Positively frightening, positively feculent. Did this gentleman perchance wear the mask and garb of Joad the Inimical, dread god of toads and 1,000 slithering beasts? As you say, lass. I am infinitely more experienced than these rosy cheeks suggest, she said. Your bearing is that of a soldier, a footman from the Minor Tarot. Many days loafing and a few hogsheads of beer ago, yeah. Grace me with a soldier's appraisal. What did you make of your squatty guest? Is he a warrior? Would he strike fear in your heart on a field of battle?
Perhaps, ma'am, as a backstabbing scout. He's awful light-footed for a man of his bulk.
Ah, come to think of it, he trod softly as a slothin's own shadow. Thank you, innkeeper. Sleep well, and dream a red dream of butchery in the name of your old king, she smiled. Oh, and my apologies for the once and future mess. The proprietor's gaze shifted from the girl to her entourage and back again. He sidled away in the manner of a fighting crab. Delia nodded to the Stoics, who immediately lurched in tandem up the rickety stairs. White ones typically preambulated as if directed by an amateur puppeteer's hand. She massaged her temples and waited the inevitable outcry. This was the essence of her professional existence. Auguries and dousing to track prey, the casting of wards and charms, the deployment of her killers. Support where necessary, although the white ones tended to be a fire and forget proposition. Sick them upon a victim and profit. She'd received a commission to eradicate Neck the Violator earlier that morning via a dead letter drop. The commission, labeled an emergency, did not enumerate Neck's offenses, many of which were common knowledge to the denizens of the city's underworld, or whom longed for his death. It would have required 10 men and a boy to tote such a scroll. Nor did Delia give a rotten fig. Neck represented an exorbitantly lucrative contract, and nothing more. Her beasts were fearsome, but few living creatures could withstand the attentions of the White Ones. The cruelty she'd wrought was exceptionally formidable, and would make short work of the Toad, his reputation notwithstanding. For an exquisitely pregnant interval, nothing perceptible happened upstairs. Then, blood welled from ceiling planks and dripped onto the table, spattering her sandals. The ecstatics cocked their heads and regarded this phenomenon with intense diffidence. Time passed and more blood dripped, but the Stoics did not return. "We'd best see what's keeping your brethren," Delia said with a strained nonchalance. In an abundance of caution, she donned 3 extra murder rings, each set with a death's head gemstone attuned to a particular medium of slaughter. These stones complemented the setting of her bejeweled belt and the master death's head. Power swelled in her middle. Power crackled in her delicate fists. The servitors preceded her, naturally. Each of them was armed with a skinning knife, cleaver, or mallet, rusty, jagged, and lethal. Once, at least 70 or 80 years ago, a wealthy, albeit naive patron inquired how a nice girl like Delia became a black magician. She lacked the marks of discernment as popularized in literature. She wasn't a hag, nor a begoateed warlock. Her supple, rosy flesh was unscarified. Neither of her shapely ankles were attached to a hoof. Delia said, "A toad resided in our family garden. Beastly, malevolent creature. It ate sparrows that flew too near. I was a child and believed in the fairy tale of kissing frogs as a method to disenchant cursed princes. Much too late did I recall that the tale made no mention of toads. Our tongues intertwined, and its viscid bile burned my core. Light and purity were seared to crisps. The rest is the rest." That same patron then asked how she'd fallen in with the men of the Flat Affect. Simple. A cruelty of their ilk raped and murdered me, unaware that this violation transpired according to my own design. As such matters predictably follow, I arose via true resurrection, and now own their souls forevermore. The inquisitive patron made no further inquiries. Ascending the stairs these many years later, she could be forgiven in indulging a morbid notion that her story had come full circle. The bitter taste in her mouth sharpened, and a thread of drool unraveled along her chin. The fingernails of her left hand blackened as the murder ring sparked and sizzled. Upstairs, a short, narrow passage extended too far and at a peculiar, canted angle, as though Delia and her entourage had entered the hold of a foundering ship. She glanced over her shoulder. The stairwell fumed with an aqueous green glow. Her breath caught. Her reactions lagged heartbeats behind the languid unfolding of events. She experienced variations of this nightmare on numerous occasions. A pitiful insect, trapped in a globe of stiffening amber, while a scarcely imaginable doom approached to snuff her life. The second door on the left was ajar. Its opening brimmed with unnatural darkness. Stars and planets and capes of celestial dust could have swooped through this slice of void, so deep, dark, and cold. No glints of stellar fire winked from within, however. Delia had studied eldritch portals and the 11 grimoires of revulsion, compulsion, and repulsion. Such ruptures contravened physical laws of material reality and spanned immense distances as causeways between worlds, between galaxies. Some wormholes cored even farther, crossing into the great dark, where flesh and brain represented provender for the sleeping dread. In either case, to cross the threshold was to court severe peril. The ecstatics flew off their feet and into the void. Minnows, yanked by the hook and line of a cosmic fisherman. She initiated a sign of greater warding. Too little, too late. A terrible force, like constricting iron bands, crushed her arms against her sides and shot her at velocity into the bottomless pit. Frigid wind shrilled. Her tears froze against her cheeks. She comforted herself with mantra, "I have known death and resurrection." And she fell, blinded in the darkness. "I have supped the black milk of the Gorgon and uttered her profane ululations." And she fell. "I have bent the will of the White Ones to my own." And she fell. "Julie V kissed my sandal." And she fell. "John Foot is my bitch." And she fell. Delia had memorized 23 greater and 39 minor signs of celestial malice. 6 names of demon kings quivered the tip of her tongue. None of these could save her, for she sensed her patrons were beyond communion. Consumed with mindless fear, she could utter naught but an inchoate cry. The sensation of plummeting ceased, instantly, seamlessly. She caught her balance, opened her eyes, and beheld the bland confines of a typical inn chamber, albeit marred by a pool of coagulating blood and the missing street-side wall, which gave way to a panorama of slimy, towering mandrake and giant ferns, instead of shit-filled gutters and shit-spattered buildings. Mist oozed over beds of variegated moss. Birds warbled and chattered. Insects whirred in endless, stinging hunger. They clouded the surface of a sluggish river. She inhaled the rank humidity, tasting ancient bark and hints of spoilage. Here was a verdant hell of hermit philosophers, a reeking, fecund Everglade, primeval as the fang of a dinosaur. This Everglade did not reside in any civilized region of the Empire. Civilization, so called, was loath to suffer the existence of a man-eating garden within its confines. She beheld no sign of her erstwhile companions who might protect her against lurking predatory fauna. Had they dissolved during transit? Or, scant difference, vanished into the gullet of a prehistoric reptile? Whence the sticky pool of blood? Thinking more clearly by the moment, she decided that moving away from the scene might be prudent, as scavengers and carnivores alike were certain to converge. Delia walked and walked parallel to the river, traversing hummocks and half-submerged logs, avoiding quicksand and fetid pools swarming with sickeningly large mosquitoes. The fates of her entourage became apparent by and by. She spied the mangled corpse of a stoic dangling from the boughs of a mangrove tree. A crocodile lazily chomped on the smirking remains of an ecstatic. Bits of the others lay scattered from hell to breakfast. Likely sufficient disparate pieces to reassemble her slaves into grisly patchworks given a fortnight or so. Their kind was nigh indestructible, although they could be severely inconvenienced by the usual methods. Unlike the white ones, she would not regenerate if reduced to a spool of guts and remnant fingers. She moved a trifle faster. The white disk of a sun hung motionless behind its veil of clouds. Reality distorted here. Time moved as slowly as the blood within the terrible lizards who drowsed in the reeds. In due course she emerged to behold a delta. Brackish water slopped near her toes. The water curved away into a milky haze, its expanse dappled by the breeze. Several crocodiles, more enormous than the specimen who'd eaten her death slave, blazed upon the delta, bloated logs decorating the tidal grounds of a ruined mansion. Neck has imbibed a dose of sanguine dream eater. She picked a gnat from her teeth with a knife-like thumbnail. That is the only explanation. It is also the worst explanation. Where she'd landed was no more important than when. Dream Eater came in a dozen flavors, each more esoteric than the last. All varieties were capable of damaging the imbiber and his or her personal reality, but as a bonus effect, sanguine Dream Eater scorched holes in the very fabric of space and time as it existed within the dreamer. Thus, the wormhole and his prehistoric jungle destination. She'd gone backward in time thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of years. The poison's nature also predicated a dreadful intimacy. The surroundings would undoubtedly bear personal relevance to Neck. No one ever truly escaped his or her own provenance. The great toad spawned here, she said. Eons gone by, he frolicked in this stew as a merry pollywog, not a twatting care in the world. Thanks to his carnivorous predilections, here I tarry. Do you not recognize your own home? She snapped her head around and saw nothing but tall grass. Either her inner demons whispered in a chorus, or the dark power spoke to her on the wind. She regarded the ruins and their guardian lizards. Many years had passed, and the mansion's dereliction was severe, so she but slowly twigged to the voice's insinuation that this was her childhood abode. You penetrated the membrane, her inner demon said. Your blood, your marrow, your animating force commingled with Walter Neck's effluvium, and not for the first time. Behold his paradise and purgatory, for it is your very own. Enough! Delia made a ward against malignant genius loci and supernatural possession, and silenced the voice. She slashed a thick sapling with her flinty nails, and it toppled. She forged the narrow delta channel, probing ahead with her impromptu staff. The nearest albino crocodile caught wind of her scent and hastily flopped into the water. Such a luxurious mansion in its heyday. She wandered its marshy halls, ceiling open to the heavens. Father had been a moderately wealthy freeman. He and Mother protested the policies of someone a bit too high up on the food chain, organized a peasant rebellion, really a glorified work slowdown, and were branded dissident traitors for their pains. Father lost his estate prior to his execution. The aggrieved nobility shipped Mother north as a trained slave. She placed Delia in the care of a distant relative, her final, desperate act. The relative, a strange, bloody-minded woman, was an occultist who'd endured the tutelage of several Grand Masters and was found wanting. However, the occultist recognized Delia's aptitude regarding the dark arts, and the child's course was set. And now, Walter Neck sprawled in the backyard where a magnificently tended garden had rioted into a fetid jungle. He lay as still as the dead, his left paw locked onto the throat of a stoic. Splinters of bone protruded from the stoic's limbs. Its staring, wet eyes swam with gnats. Mindlessly loyal to the bitter end, it had expired pursuing her quarry. Delia could have revived her minion with a finger snap, although the result might have proved more interesting had the swallowed her pet. She poised to make the gesture and utter the fateful syllables. Neck coughed. His grotesque bulk shuddered. He pushed the corpse aside and laboriously rolled to his knees. That brought him and Delia to approximately the same height. "So, we meet again," she said. "You look terrible." He glared at her. "Says the goth chick with a lazy eye and bad makeup." His breath was a pungent cocktail of half-digested carrion, hot offal, and poison. And that voice. "We can't all be silver-tongued devils like Rabbit Abbott." He knew she was right. It pained him nonetheless. Rabbit Abbott isn't a name I recall. "Exactly, and you've never crossed my path either. I'd remember your attitude." "As a young toad, you dwelt near the foot of a yon vine-entangled fountain." She retreated several steps and opened her hand. "I held you in my palm." "Hate to be the bearer of ill tidings, crazy lady. I haven't been a young anything since the bold mountains were pointy, and the east and west continents were a vast swampy plate." We kissed. It did not end well. "If you can't discern the difference between a frog and a toad, you were doomed at the outset." He climbed upright. His shadow fell over her. "I'm dying a slow, horrible death via poison. The pain is exacerbated by this tedious conversation." Yes, you swallowed a dose of sanguine dream eater," she said. "I suspect that Mr. or Mrs. X became anxious, fearing a delayed reaction meant you'd either avoided the poison or were immune. He or she sent me to finish the job." "Mr. X? Oh, no mystery in that regard. Seneschal Geld decided to terminate my services now that the royal coup is accomplished." "That asshole?" I wondered who could afford the extravagance of SDE. There are 7 doses left in existence. 6 doses. "You intend to come at me, or what? The sun is going to set in 1,000,000 years, give or take, and I don't want to miss the spectacle." Though he didn't appear to be in any condition to threaten her, Delia maintained a healthy distance as she turned the problem over in her mind. "Here we are at a pretty pass. I hesitate to dispatch your miserable soul to the great dark. Due to these exigent circumstances, our fates may be temporarily intertwined." "Oh, fortunate me." Neck peered at the sky. "Don't take offense when I say that your intentions are the least of my problems." He pointed at a speck that detached from the sun and floated closer. "You will soon regret that bit about our intertwined fates." "Apologies." A hair-raising shriek echoed across the gulf. Her demons returned with a gleeful monologue. "Time is a ring. The hole in its heart yawns. It is the crack that runs through everything. It is the bottomless pit that nothing can fill. The great toad is expressed in his myriad iterations, as some believe all men are mere fragments of a singular god." "What approaches?" she said. "He who finally noticed our arrival. The terrible shadow that dwells on high." He glanced at her. "Heard of him?" god of the beasts of the air, fisher of souls, fisher of amphibian souls, and also whomever happens to be standing nearby. The speck bridged the gap with astonishing velocity and grew by magnitudes. A monstrously enormous heron surmounted by a hemisphere of glittering shadow, astride a second inverted hemisphere of thunderheads. The heron to end all herons descended to the mouth of the delta. It might have swallowed an elephant. It might have devoured an army mounted upon elephants. Water boiled to vapor with each crashing beat of its wings that cast shadows across the earth and the water and into the forest. Wind battered Nick and Delia, and they were drenched. The heron of herons folded its dripping wings and loomed. Azure head and feathers, crimson-throated, crimson-beaked, midnight black of breast, and eyes of molten gold. Tall as the trees, its bill parted to emit a frightful shriek that caused lesser birds to pelt against the canopy and the crocodiles to hurl themselves into the reeds, tails whipping madly. One lizard rolled over and floated belly up in the shallows. Delia went to her knees and bowed her head in instinctive supplication. Nick covered his eyes to ward off flying chaff and waited for whatever must come.
"Oh, fuck me running,"
the god of herons said, nasally and dinful.
"I know you, Toad. I've had you in my throat once upon a time."
"Oh, that's what your mother—"
"Shut up! Be-warted imbecile!"
The heron raised his voice, and the blast was bonfire hot and rich with blood and righteous bile.
"Let me recount our history. I speared your feckin' sire with my bill and drank his nasty juices until naught remained but a warty sack. My mate, Agatha, feasted upon the rancid innards of your dame. We romantically gazed into one another's eyes as we gulped the vast ochre strings of eggs that were your embryonic siblings. We gorged ourselves upon the pollywogs who fled in vain beneath the mossy sludge of these ponds. Made it a game of hide and seek, in fact. How many regulars could I shish kebab at once? Loads. But you foul, poisonous, feculent turd on legs. You caught in my throat as your glands oozed a hypnagogic poison, not unlike the sanguine dream eater I sent upon you now. Your squamous, vile hide choked me, and I spat you into the world. Good riddance, says I. Then I curled into my nest for 25 winters, shitting explosively, while regurgitating a belly full of hapless lesser glade dwellers as I succumbed to a febrile dream of unlife. Neck wiped the heron's spittle from his misshapen dome and waited for the trees to cease swaying and the roiled waters to calm. Aloysius, either eat us or fuck off back to your stump. Aloysius, god of herons, the terrible shadow that dwells on high, Bloody Bill, and 100 others, shifted his head side to side. I would, dear slimy brute. Yet I dare not. You are a piece of meat wriggling beneath my invidious talon. But you are also an aspect of dread and awful Joad, whom I'd rather not offend. His claws are long. His tongue is longer. As for the semi-mortal, she is human. Worse, she reeks of the White One's unlife taint, and it riles my gorge. Agatha ate the little shits like Turkish delight, green goddess help her. What does he mean, you're an aspect of Joad? Delia still bowed, spoke sotto voce to Neck. Neck said, the heron's fearful presence is a purgative of the subconscious.
Memories return to me as if gaseous bubbles long suspended in muck rise to the surface of a lake. It sounds correct, although fog remains. I am diminished from a previous life. Greatly diminished.
Hurrah, she said. Are you a toad dreaming you're a god, or the ass end around?
Her demons hissed, whether in rage or delight, she couldn't tell.
Nick, you gorgeous devil, all becomes clear. You've likely died 1,000 deaths, only to reincarnate anew, albeit with your original form and vestigial memories. You exist as a broken mirror exists, each shattered shard reflecting within its frame of reference, yet an inviolate piece of the whole. We might yet quit this backwater oblivion.
Oh, to what purpose? The king desires my head on a stick. You mean to collect the reward? The definition of untenable.
Geld desires your head, Delia said. Not I. Considering this revelation regarding your provenance, a bag of coin is insufficient. The residual damage of SDE is liable to be ongoing, which means you may persist as dual iterations simultaneously. God of Toads and Toad. The possibilities are quite staggering. She poked his chest. Someone well-versed in esoteric methods must watch over you to ascertain your body and soul remain integrated with corporeal reality.
Oh, I kind of like it here, Neck said. It's peaceful. Perhaps.
I'll rest a while.
The god of herons clawed a gout of muddy water into the air.
Forget it, bilious sack! Oh, murderous sucker of slugs!
This is my domain. Your particular acre resides far from these shores should you crave a return to that benighted realm. Go! Squat in primacy over garter snakes and tadpoles. Go in peace, or go in pieces. That's the best offer you'll receive today.
Fine. How do you propose I effect my departure? So far as I can determine, the poison is a one-way trip.
Soon the sanguine dream eater in your blood shall dissipate, the god of herons said. The wound in your mind shall seal. Neither of you belong in this paradise. You shall be expelled from my domain, as a splinter is ultimately disgorged from its seat in flesh.
Neck regarded Delia. Well, this is beyond my ken. She nodded.
Our intrusion has deformed this reality. Time and space are out of joint. By all rights, we should rot for eternity, or be devoured by a lumbering denizen of the land. However, the god of the Everglade wishes us gone, so it shall come to pass. His will is irresistible in his domain. I would expect the earth to open beneath our feet and swallow us at any moment. Allow me to assist.
The god of herons pecked at the shore with his executioner's bill. The ground crumbled and fell into a pit.
You'd best be gone when I return. He fluffed his plumage and waded into deeper water before launching toward the sky.
Delia and Neck exchanged glances. Since there was nothing for it but to do it, they descended. They rested at the bottom. A tunnel cored into the gloom. Above, the patch of hazy sky winked out like a blown candle, and they were sealed in pitch blackness. Delia gripped his elbow as they moved forward, blindly into the unknown. In a while, a guttural, wheezing cry echoed from the way they'd come. It sounded again. Closer. Something enormous must have uttered such a cry.
Dare I ask? Nick said. Faster, she said, lest you meet yourself on the road through purgatory. I am unprepared for that. His freedom to roam shall be curtailed in our material reality. We must survive to reach it. Haste, Toad.
I've seen myself, glorified in the hold of doom. He began moving again, dragging her along. Joad would be sorely disappointed in what I have made of his legacy. Delia said nothing. One question. His raspy voice floated strangely in the dark. Speak it, Toad. Did we really kiss? The sands of midnight had recently passed through the hourglass when Seneschal Geld strode into the royal bedchamber sans invitation. Tall and lean, he bowed, bending like a half-opened folding knife. His conical hat of office scraped the tiles. Your Majesty, pardon me. King Dick, sunk to his chin in an herbal bath, was not amused at the interruption. The king was seldom amused unless the activity related to something pleasurable, such as the complete destruction of one of his countless enemies or detractors. Why are you bothering me, Geld? Your expression of acute fear is troublesome. What has gone wrong? I do hope you've snipped all loose ends and nothing will come back to haunt us. Please be exceedingly concise, as I have no wish to become acquainted with the details of your heinous undertakings. Heinous undertakings on your behalf, Seneschal Geld said. Indeed, you must truly be in the soup to speak with such temerity. The good news, sire, the loose ends are well ensnipped, as you say. The bad news, the help in this matter are rather disgruntled, if you take my meaning. Yes, I hear you've solicited the talents of a black magician, among other unsavory villains. Kudos on securing the magician. I thought John Foote and Julie V were the last of that ilk for another generation or two. Never mind. How does this concern me? Assassins threaten my person, Seneschal Geld said. He'd not seen a flat affect man prior to tonight. However, when a stoic had emerged from behind a colonnade, there could have been scant doubt as to its purpose or ability. The miscreants lurk within the palace itself as your loyal and trusted servants. It would stand to reason that my problems are inevitably your problems, sire. King Dick scooped soap into his hand and blew a bubble. Dear Geld, as of this moment your position is vacant. Hie thee into town and take lodgings wherever you deem fit. Wait for the herald to announce a call for candidates. I'd say a 10-day at minimum, perhaps a fortnight. If your head rests upon your shoulders at such time, please be welcome to submit yourself with the other applicants. Sire, if you are not beheaded, Mr. Geld, or worse, my money's on something worse. Seneschal Geld didn't bother to plead his case. King Dick's favorite bodyguards waited outside the door and would cheerfully cleave the seneschal from stem to stern if their master so much as whistled. As you say, sire. He bowed again as protocol demanded, and hastily departed for his own chambers to retrieve a satchel of personal items before making good his escape. A draft moaned in the corridors of power. Lamps were spaced at lonely intervals. Seneschal Geld bunched his robes in his hands and hustled, aware that some grim fate pursued him. Indeed, an ecstatic blocked the passage back. The seneschal ducked into a doorway and fled through a series of unlighted antechambers. The palace was a honeycomb of levels piled upon levels that few had ever fully explored. It sprawled with disorienting grandeur, and he soon lost his way. No matter what door he opened, or what hall he traveled, a white one was there to chivvy him along, down short stairwells, then longer, narrower stairs connected by longer, narrower, less illuminated passages. First dust, then moss and mold and dripping water, his stone roughened and cracked with antiquity. No matter that he broke into a trot, then a panicked gallop, a white one paced him with a queer, shuffling gait. Finally, he staggered, gasping and spent, into a decrepit cathedral, lighted by a pair of iron braziers. The braziers seethed and shimmered with red coals. Broad flagstone steps descended to a shallow basin at the heart of the chamber. Ankle-deep water rippled, disturbed by the flow of a hidden spring. A scaly plinth, surmounted by a rusted iron hexagonal pyramid, rose from the center of the basin. The temple walls were formed of basalt. Weird red shadows crawled across the weirder stone and plaster effigies of neglected gods. The heron, the toad, the leech, the sleeper, the lord of the Black River, and the father-mother. These figures towered within alcoves that nearly scraped the vaulted ceiling. There was no visible entrance beside the archway. A trio of white ones slouched at the threshold, content to observe Geld's escalating terror. They grinned and scowled, perfectly still, perfectly content. A dripping, squelching eructation caused the braziers to gutter. Geld turned even as the distended, lolling tongue of Joad drooled forth, its barbs scraping over stone. He sprang backward, but the reeking flesh coiled around him. Its barbs pierced him, and he gasped in pleasure, or agony, both of the same. He was drawn upward, kicking and squirming toward a monstrous bulk shed of its plaster shell. "This isn't as grand as the Hall of Doom," Joad whispered in the seneschal's mind, "but it's a decent likeness." King Dick nibbled a fig. He sipped wine from a gem-encrusted goblet. He said, "Well, I suppose that's the last anyone will ever hear of the pointy-headed bastard. Unfortunately, I'm down as seneschal. He was pretty effective, too. He absolutely terrified the staff." Nearby shadows dissolved at the merest hint of unearthly radiance to reveal Delia in repose upon a pile of silk cushions. She too munched on figs and enjoyed a lovely goblet of wine. Don't think of it as losing a seneschal. Think of it as gaining a court magician. And, whatever in the 19 hells your friend is, the king said, an exquisitely dangerous pet. As you say. Meanwhile, the bath grows tepid. Perhaps you'd care to fetch that fluffy towel and dry off the royal fundament? His smirk faded as he noticed the water in his tub was rather inky. It stained the marble a deep, rich crimson. He wondered if he should call for his guards. He wondered if it would make a difference. The faint glow suffusing Delia's flesh drained into her eyes, and they briefly flared metallic purple. Then, her eyes too dimmed and dimmed, and she sank into the shadows. Tell me more about our burgeoning friendship, the king said to make conversation. It isn't going to be anything like you imagine, she said.
Chilling tales for dark nights.